Like yesterday, I have to say, I bought stuff I didn't need because the deal was so good, and I also am a member of Rakuten, and they were offering like 15 or 20% cash back on a variety of stores, where basically if you buy through their app, you get the cash back, like no strings attached. How many people are like me that spent money that they didn't need to because the deals were good? And how many people like really waited for the best deal on that TV that they could find?
Yeah, so I think that all of these sales events, are really important for the fourth quarter. The consumer as a whole is very deal driven, so they were waiting for those Black Friday deals, which, were rolled out well before Black Friday. We're talking early to mid-November when those started coming out. Cyber Monday was just another, version of that sale. When we analyzed across our coverage, sales were about the same to last year, very similar to Black Friday in most cases. But if you think about Best Buy, Tractor Supply, and even some of Williams-Sonoma's brands, those deals were better than they were a year ago. So people that didn't shop those Black Friday sales, maybe waited to see if it got a little bit better on Monday, maybe would have pulled the trigger.
Lindsay, do we have any idea how consumers are paying for all this stuff? Are they racking up credit card debt? Because obviously there's a significant part of this population that is hurting financially. Maybe doesn't own stocks, bonds, real estate, and therefore inflation's been a real problem for them.
Yes, we don't have clarity specifically on exactly how consumers are financing it, but buy now, pay later was already picking up last year. So I imagine that has continued to increase in usage. This holiday season. I even personally in a shopping experience, I was in a mall store and somebody was leveraging that buy now, pay later. So I would expect, increased credit cards, buy now, pay later, all the options at their disposal are being used.
Any company so far in your coverage stands out as a winner?
Yeah, so it's interesting. That's an interesting question, because if you think about it from their perspective, someone like a Dick's Sporting Goods, they kept their discounts very limited. I think that exudes strength. They have the demand, so they don't need to discount like their entire store 30 to 50%, like some of the apparel retailers that we saw doing. So that puts them in a position of strength also from a margin perspective. One thing that I thought was really interesting in my coverage, Williams-Sonoma, they've been battling sort of a weak home demand, for at least a year now. They increased their sale at the Williams-Sonoma cookware brand and their Pottery Barn Teen. But why that's interesting is those are actually their two best performing brands this year. So instead of like leaning into the weaker brand, like a Pottery Barn have been a laggard for them, they increased the discount for the shoppers for the brands that are doing well. I don't know if they're trying to just capitalize on the loyalty there, but I thought that was very interesting.
Interesting, right. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. Lindsay Dutch, she's a consumer hardline senior analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from our Princeton, New Jersey office. Coming up just after 11 a.m. Wall Street time, we're going to have an interview, a simulcast with Bloomberg Television. John Stankey, he is the CEO of AT&T. He speaks with Bloomberg's technology anchor, Caroline Hyde. They just reported some recent numbers. They're upping their buyback, $20 billion on the buyback. So this stock is the highest it's been since 2021. So focusing on the core telecom business, shareholders like that. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are two big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio. Radio.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We have a great hour lined up for you. In just moments, we're going to hear from John Stankey, AT&T CEO, speaking with Bloomberg Technology anchor Caroline Hyde. We will bring that to you as it comes. Also, we'll speak to Sarah Samuels, Head of Investment Manager Research over at NEPC. What's up with the private marketplace for 2025? We're making all the hay about how much we're invested in U.S. public equities, but what about that private market? Plus, Gabrielle Coppola is Bloomberg Auto's reporter. She has our big take story today on what's going on over with Stellantis and how that shift in management is going to impact the company. So a great hour lined up for you, but let's kick it all off with the business flash. And for that, we go to Amy Morris. Amy.
All right, thank you, Alex. Leo Kogwan is one of Tesla's largest individual shareholders. Now he says he is paring his stake in the automaker and putting some proceeds into government debt. Kogwan is aiming to hedge his portfolio, fearing a potential stock market crash similar to 1929. Tesla shares now down about 2%. Job openings rose more than expected in October, but so did quit rates. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, you know it as JOLTS, shows available positions increased to 7.74 million. That's from a revised 7.37 million reading in September, led nearly entirely by professional and business services and accommodation and food services. The South Korean won has weakened sharply on news that President Yoon has declared martial law. The won now down nearly 2%, trading at 14.32 against the dollar. South Korean officials have said they will provide unlimited equity, or rather unlimited liquidity, to markets if necessary. We do check those markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is little changed on the downside. NASDAQ little changed on the upside, and the Dow is down 0.2%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.21% and the 2-year at 4.18%. BlackRock has agreed to buy HPS Investment Partners in an all-stock deal valued at roughly $12 billion. That's a purchase that will propel the world's largest asset manager into the highest ranks of private credit. BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink.
BlackRock's private credit and HPS are highly complementary, and together we will serve approximately $240 billion of pro forma client assets, primarily in private debt.
BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's go back to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul and Alex.
Amy Morris, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. We are streaming live on YouTube as well, so head over to youtube.com, search Bloomberg Podcast. As Amy was just reporting, kind of red and green on the screen, but let's see what's going on under the hood. For that, we check in with Nora Melinda. She is Bloomberg Equities reporter. Nora, what are you looking at today?
Well, I'm keeping an eye on a few things this morning. I'm keeping an eye on AT&T, that's ticker T. Now, the company is rising. It's seeing its highest intraday level since 2021, and this is after it predicted sustained profit growth over the next 3 years. This is a really good outlook here. They also mentioned a $20 billion buyback, and they said that over the next 3 years, they should have double-digit gains in 2027, driven mainly by investments in mobile phone and fiber optic networks, and it expects to return over $40 billion to shareholders through dividends and share repurchases over the next 3 years. So really good news, and we are seeing the Wall Street analysts, investors actually rallying, making the stock go higher. We're seeing shares up as much as 5.9% in trading today.
Yeah, and I should point out, it's the best performing stock in the S&P, and communication services, the best performing sector in the S&P.
Right. Yeah, and it's been a while. We've been waiting decades for this. Get it just a little streamlined, a little focused. Don't go into the media business. Don't go into the internet. Just focus on your core telecom business.
Paying off.
And it's starting to pay
Finally.
off. And on that line, John Stankey, again, the CEO of AT&T, he'll be joining us, Bloomberg Television and Radio, in just moments, speaking with Bloomberg's technology anchor, Caroline Hyde.
Well, I also want to take a look at Zscaler. Now, this is a security software company. It's ticker ZS. We're seeing shares falling more than 7%, and this is after it gave a forecast for adjusted second quarter earnings that missed expectations. Analysts have also been looking at the company's billings growth. They said that it was lighter than expected. Morgan Stanley said that first quarter results were, quote, fine, but the company's billings beat was lighter than expected due to mechanical headwinds related to prior contracts. So we're seeing the company falling. We're seeing shares falling this morning off of this news.
Also, didn't it have like a nice solid run up too over the like relatively so ever since September.
Yeah, let's
You've
pull up a
seen like a
chart.
climb. And it's been a little bit volatile, but you've definitely seen a climb higher. Also, you're taking a look at U.S. Steel shares. So I don't know. I really wasn't terribly surprised with this move, but it looks like a Nippon U.S. Steel deal will also be blocked under President Trump.
Right. I mean, lots to keep an eye on this morning. And as you mentioned, this is something that I am watching pretty closely, me and my team. But we are seeing U.S. Steel falling after Donald Trump said that he reiterated his opposition to the sale to Nippon Steel. And investors are really watching this and keeping this in mind, especially as we think about this being an obstacle for acquisition, and especially as this is currently under review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States.
All right, great stuff. Norm, thanks a lot. Really appreciate Norm Melinda joining us from Bloomberg News, equities reporter joining us on all the details when it comes to the equity market. All right, let's get to BlackRock and sort of why it wound up buying HPS, that credit firm, sort of what that winds up meaning. I mean, BlackRock is already a behemoth, so now in the credit space, it would be even a bigger behemoth. Can you be a bigger behemoth?
Yes, this puts them into the top 5 in private credit.
Okay, so mega behemoth. Let's go with that. All right, Neil Sipes is Bloomberg Intelligence financials analyst. Joins us now. So put it into perspective here.
Yeah, so as you noted, top 5 in private credit now, and notably top 5 in alternatives as a whole. And so, you know, they've long been top 10 in the space, you know, rivaling the names like a Blackstone, Apollo. But when you think about BlackRock, you're thinking about $11.5 trillion in assets, a couple $100 billion in alternatives. That's a pretty small piece of the pie for them. So you don't necessarily think of them as a main leader in the alternative space and private market space. But what we've seen so far this year is 3 transactions, GIP, Preqin, and now HPS, and they're really pushing into this space because that's where the growth is and that's where the fees are.
It's just a phenomenal deal. You can do it with all stock as well. How cool is that if you're BlackRock? Who is HPS? Are they ex-Goldman guys? Is that kind of, how big are they in the space?
Yeah, so they're about 150 billion now. And like you noted, I mean, BlackRock had about 80 billion in private credit prior to this. So it really more than doubles that business for them. And I think, you know, what you're seeing a little bit at BlackRock is sort of this catch-up game. As I just noted, those 3 transactions really geared towards the private markets this year. And they're paying, you know, heftier prices for these types of transactions. I noted this is where the growth is. This is where the fees are. You know, the $12 billion price tag for HPS, that's about 8% of assets, 30 times, you know, fee-related earnings. So they're sort of playing catch-up in this space. And when you think about HPS, 150 billion is not small, but that's about 1% of BlackRock as a whole, right? But when you look at the fees that HPS is generating, that's almost 5% of what BlackRock's revenue is. So you can sort of think about the dichotomy there of aligning the organic growth opportunity more with the revenue opportunity.
Are there more HPSs out there?
There may be. I don't think we're going to, I mean, I won't say I don't think we're going to see BlackRock do any more because they are showing that they're taking initiative to really beef up in a space that you could argue they were a little bit under-indexed versus some of their traditional competitors in the space. So we'll be interested to see what is potentially coming down the road. But again, let's remember that they are sort of digesting a handful of transactions that are pretty sizable and what we'll call transformational for a business that you're typically thinking of sort of the index and passive type products.
At the end of the day, who competes with BlackRock, really? Aren't they just...
Well, okay, what
like,
is BlackRock
government?
now at this point?
Yeah, what is BlackRock now at this point?
BlackRock is, I guess, I'll say everything sort of in the asset
So you're
management
at dinner at
space.
Thanksgiving and like someone's like, hey, what's BlackRock? And you're like, it's everything.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything now in the asset management space. And again, I think they're really filling out that space where they were maybe least indexed to, and, you know, really focusing in on where the fees are. And that's what this private credit transaction is going to do.
So are some of the big private equity guys too, like Blackstone, et cetera, are they also just massive asset managers now too, rather than just private equity guys?
So they are, and I mean, they're sizable, and it's a different realm that we're talking about than BlackRock's 11 trillion. We're talking about single-digit trillions and high 100 billions. But again, you know, that size is not necessarily representative of the fees that these firms are generating. So you think about the names like a Blackstone, Apollo, Ares, KKR, Carlyle, all of those as a group. I mean, that's where that explosive growth has been in asset management, aside from that passive, low fee type space, right? you're seeing those longer duration assets, those private markets really being where investors want to allocate their cash. You look at the expectations for allocations to increase pretty much broadly across the spectrum in private markets. That's where some of those, we'll call them smaller, more specialized alternative managers are winning.
All right, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it for joining us there, Neil
The
Sipes.
big get bigger. The
They
big
can get bigger.
They do.
I mean, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. I feel like there's a children's book about biggering. Yes, it's a Dr. Seuss book. All right, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. Neil Sipes, Bloomberg Intelligence financial analyst. All right, Paul, walk me through AT&T over the last 40 years. Go.
Yeah, go. I mean, this, AT&T came out of the deregulation of the telecom business. Telecom Act 1994 was one of the big ones, 1996, and it just kind of created the long distance part of what was Bell Telephone, and the regional Bells went their own way, and AT&T as a long distance business went its way. They've kind of lost their way, from time and again over the years, thinking about the internet and stuff like that. But right now they are focused on their core telecom business. Right now, let's focus on John Stankey, CEO of AT&T, sitting down with Bloomberg's technology anchor Caroline Hyde. Let's take a listen.
Focus. How do you get there?
Look, we've had great success with what we've built thus far, and we see customers, first of all, love the product. They stay with us longer. They drive better value into the business. We're having great success at selling multiple products into fiber households. 4 out of every 10 of our fiber subscribers also subscribe to our wireless service today, and that's getting higher. And when you think about where technology is going in the future, workloads are only going to go up. We expect data consumption is going to increase about 80% over the next 5 years. And fiber is the one that can do that. It's the one that has the symmetrical bandwidth characteristics that will facilitate AI and sending more data up into a network than what comes down, which is traditionally how broadband networks are built today. And we think that's a great investment for the long haul.
John, just as you speak, we've got some breaking international news. We've just got to bring our viewers of South Korean lawmakers voting to request lifting martial law. We will bring you up to the moment news, but South Korean National Assembly Speaker Woo is saying they will protect democracy. John, we return to you at a U.S. focus and a business that you are currently wanting to see, really the bandwidth and the broadband and the infrastructure play that you're offering. What's interesting is the way that you're fueling investment in fiber in particular is by doing innovative partnerships like the one with BlackRock. Do you need outside investment to commit to this sort of infrastructure rollout?
Look, we have a great portfolio of options. Primary portfolio play is owned and operated, where we take 100% of the economics, we fund it, build it, and operate it ourselves. But we also realize we're in kind of a constrained window right now. Fiber is needed now. There isn't going to be a window that's open for a long period of time to do this work. Capital markets, of course, private capital markets sometimes provide a little bit of insulation that public markets won't. And in order to make sure we keep our lead, we'll balance that portfolio out. And our relationship with BlackRock and our Gigapower work has been really effective. What we've proven in the market is that we can operate outside of our traditional operating territory just as effectively as we have in our home territory. I think BlackRock as a partner has viewed it as being a really successful investment. They've been willing to put more into it, and we expect we're going to continue to use that as one of the tools to grow our footprint over time to get past that 50 million we're talking about.
And it's really interesting you brought up, of course, AI and the demands there. In many ways, everyone's been wringing their hands over the energy infrastructure needs, and BlackRock's sort of funding that infrastructure build out. But how significant is the AI demand and the strains on what you provide?
It's an interesting issue. I think actually power consumption is going to be really important moving forward. That's one of the things we're talking about today with our analysts and investors, which is how do we shut down our century-old copper infrastructure and all the electronics and equipment that support it that are really power hungry. And that's one of the ways that getting more of this traffic over to fiber, which is passive and uses a lot less power, that we can actually help to offset some of the increase of what data demand and AI will drive moving forward. And we think that's a really important policy dynamic on this. Look, I think there's going to be a lot of issues that the country has to work through on getting the power grid to support leadership in AI. It's going to happen. Maybe it gets slowed down a little bit. Maybe there's a few bumps in the road. But what we do know is that demand's going to be continuing to go up.
Well, you're also talking to analysts and investors about today is how you're giving money back. Big returns to investors, whether you're doing it through dividend, but also through buybacks as well. Why have you chosen that angle now you've paid down debt?
It's a good day when you're giving more back to shareholders. Look, we feel very comfortable with our debt position that we're going to arrive at in the middle of next year, and that's why we're making this announcement today. First of all, we did a really nice job of structuring our balance sheet properly, so we've got really attractive interest rates on our portfolio of debt. We've got it termed out. That's a really, frankly, a strategic asset in the way it's set up right now. And given that we're largely investing organically in the business, reinvesting in our business like this and getting our leverage structure the way it is feels very comfortable to us, because every year we're reinvesting in capital, reinvesting in assets that we hold. And frankly, when you kind of look at some of the M&A work we've done as we've restructured the business, we spun out certain non-strategic assets. We haven't really gone back after the equity structure and reducing the share count outstanding. And when the dividend yield is still over 5%, we've got fantastic dividends coverage. This is an opportunity for us to maybe balance that out a little bit and bring a little bit of equity back in-house.
Okay, let's talk about that changing of your own portfolio of the assets you hold, DirecTV moving away. I mean, will we see that being integral to these financial forecasts?
No, we've actually, today, as we sit down and talk with the investment community, we'll be providing restated constructs under ex-DirecTV, assuming that we're going to close that by the middle of next year. We still see great improvements in our cash flow. We'll expect that we'll probably grow cash flow by about $1 billion a year, even without DirecTV as we move through this planning process. We see acceleration in our EPS. Our EBIT is going to continue to grow. So, you know, DirecTV has been really good. It's provided us a lot of cash coverage. We did a really nice job of managing the asset down to this point. It's time to focus on what we're going to do moving forward, which is build a world-class connectivity business, and it's the right decision to make at this point.
A lot of analysts are echoing that, and we are, of course, with John Sankey, the AT&T CEO, to our worldwide radio and TV audiences. Many relieved that you're getting back to what you do best, which is telecoms. Within that, though, is, you know, some really clarity being given on the numbers. You're getting $40 billion plus of anticipated shareholder returns, $50 billion plus of financial capacity over the next 3 years. What are the risks? We're at this time of a new administration coming in. There are macro headwinds, global headwinds. Are there risks to these numbers?
Well, I think every time there's an administration change, there's usually a discussion about, boy, could changes negatively impact a business. I recall 4 years ago there was a little bit of that narrative going on, and I think we've done just fine for the last 4 years. And frankly, some of the things that I hear right now, tax policy, possibly reinstituting accelerated depreciation, those things could be very, very good for our business. And in fact, when they were in place and they weren't lapsing, we were investing at a higher level. And so I think if this administration, incoming administration, follows through on what they'd like to do, which is to put pro-investment policies in place for the nation's, one of the nation's largest capital investors, that's going to be a really good thing for us. So we watch that carefully. Certainly, like everybody else, there's other policies up in the air around tariffs and a few other things that we're all kind of wondering what might occur with that. I think sane minds will prevail. I think some of what we're hearing right now is directed to make sure that we negotiate from a position of strength, and we make sure that we respect the U.S. market as strong and as meaningful as it is, that people should play on a fair and level playing field when they gain access to it. And I'm hopeful that we'll see good policy comes out that drives good investment and good economic returns as a result.
Well, returns are up on your shares. You're currently trading at the highest since 2021. More broadly, do you think that you can sustain this sort of growth?
We do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be out giving the 3-year guidance that we're giving. We feel, first of all, strong in the fundamentals. Consumers need to use more internet. They need to get higher performance networks to support that. That's the business we're in. And we're going to talk a little bit this afternoon with our investors about our ability to manage the cost structure in dealing with that accelerating and increased growth, so that as customers use more, that we can ultimately drop more cash to the bottom line. And that growth dynamic of us getting more efficient, people using more of the product, we think that's going to sustain itself over the next 3 years, and that's why we gave the guidance that we gave.
We so appreciate you coming live from the AT&T Stadium over there in Texas. John Stankey, AT&T CEO.
Thanks.
All right, excellent. Bloomberg technology anchor Caroline Hyde speaking with John Stankey. He is the CEO of AT&T. I think he was down there at like AT&T Stadium down in Dallas. That's pretty cool. You get the naming rights. I guess you could do some live TV hits there. So just talking about AT&T stock really performing well here. They're upping their buyback and returning cash to shareholders, which at the end of the day for a telecom company, it's a pretty good strategy, I think. And then investors kind of are agreeing the stock's the highest it's been since 2021. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C., get a little bit of a reset here with Amy Morris. Amy, what do you have?
All right, thank you, Paul. French lawmakers will hold a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Michel Barnier tomorrow. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen and a left-wing coalition are expected to join forces to topple the French government. That would create more uncertainty around the budget and an unknown potential economic and financial impact. The euro is little changed. It's now trading at 105 against the dollar. And checking the markets, the S&P is down 0.1%. NASDAQ is up 0.1%. The Dow is down 0.3%. And you just heard him, John Stankey, AT&T CEO, saying that the demand for AI will mean also a greater demand for power consumption. He says they have to find a way to make that more efficient and soon.
How do we shut down our century-old copper infrastructure and all the electronics and equipment that support it that are really power hungry? And that's one of the ways that getting more of this traffic over to fiber, that we can actually help to offset some of the increase of what data demand and AI will drive moving forward.
John Stankey, AT&T CEO, speaking with Bloomberg Technology. And China ratcheted up tensions with the U.S. with a ban on several materials with high-tech and military applications. A tit-for-tat move after President Biden's administration escalated technology curbs on Beijing. Gallium, germanium, antimony, and super hard materials no longer allowed to be shipped to America. Beijing also says it's placing tighter controls on graphite. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, you can subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. We want to go back now to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul and Alex.
All right, thanks so much, Amy Morris. Alex Steele here along Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio, and we are broadcasting to you live from our interactive broker studio right here in Midtown Manhattan. So what do you do next year when it comes to the public markets is definitely one story. What do you do when it comes to the private market, private equity, when it comes to say, venture capital? What's growth equity going to do? What about buyouts? We're going to see IPOs. Do mergers really happen? And how do you invest in it when that is the place to be? Well, joining us now in studio is Sarah Samuels, Head of Investment Manager Research over at NEPC. She's a partner over there and oversees the firm's 45-person investment manager selection team across private equity, private debt, private real estate, real assets, hedge funds, and public markets. Sarah, it's great to have you in studio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see you again.
You too. So let's leave public market side for a sec because we get plenty of guys with their calls, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about the private market.
Yeah.
What do you think is what the hot spots are going to be for next year?
Well, just to set the stage for what's on limited partners' minds, institutional investors' minds today, they're really not seeing the distribution activity that they typically have. So distribution to paid-in capital is not coming back at the pace that they had modeled out. And what that means is that there are fewer dollars to commit to future funds because it's an equation, it's a closed-loop system, there isn't unlimited capital. And so we're really hoping that we see deal activity and distributions and transaction activity begin to pick up in 2025. And I think that it will. We are seeing lower interest rates, which helps with the deal economics. We are seeing better valuations, and we may see some stimulative policy.
And it looks like I guess just maybe from a tax perspective, there may be some easier tax treatment for some of these gains that some of the limited partners have. Do you expect this new administration to foster more deal flow? We have seen some reporting on that. Do you guys, from your perspective, expect to see increased deal flow, whether it's IPOs, whether it's
M&A, bolt-ons?
Yes, so there are a number of ways that these things can happen, that these deals can actually be executed. There's obviously the IPO market, which is open today, but not being tapped broadly because buyers and sellers are not meeting in the middle on price. There are strategic investments, so selling to corporations, and we are still seeing a lot of that. And then there's sponsor to sponsor, which is a private markets firm buying something from another private markets firm. And so if we see more favorable tax treatment, if we see lower interest rates, more easy antitrust stances, as well as regulatory easing, then I think that it could be quite a bit easier for smaller companies in particular to either go public or to, grow their earnings.
So typically when I talk to someone in private equity, they're like, oh, well, it's a vintage, so it's a long term, right? So you're going to give us money now. You don't get it back for 10 years. Like, it's fine. Like, everything will sort itself out in 10 years. And then we get to today, and then I want my money back. It's been 10 years, and it's hard to get that cash back. Does that interrupt the popularity of private equity or even a private credit at this point, or are these things that are just managed?
It's a great question. There's a lot to it. So it doesn't interrupt the popularity because there is still a pretty meaningful premium for private market investments over public markets. And public markets alone are not going to get institutions to where they need to be. Many institutions have an expected return of 6, 7, 8% nominal. And we're expecting, mid-single digit returns for U.S. equities, for example, over the next 10 years. Whereas in the private markets, we're expecting double-digit returns.
But double-digit, like 10, 11, 12%, or like more than that?
Depends on the area. So
area,
for something like private debt, and there are a variety of different flavors in there. There's subordinated capital. There's, direct lending, which is a lower returning asset today. There's a lot of capital in there. There's distress, and then there's opportunistic, which we're really excited about. And that's a catch-all term for really creative financing solutions. So that's either providing liquidity. So being a liquidity provider is what we are most excited about, both in this year, in 2024, and next year. That could be providing creative financing solutions for GPs to get capital back to LPs. It could be being a lender to real estate, with real estate debt, through private debt, or by investing in secondaries and providing liquidity to GPs and LPs alike.
Are you surprised we haven't had more IPO activity in 2024? I mean, the S&P's up 25%. I mean, back in the day, I would have been ripping companies out of into the marketplaces. I mean, right. We get a 10% move in the market, we're on the phone straight for 36 hours calling everybody.
So IPO activity has honestly not historically been the lion's share of exits. Yep. So, but it is very important, and it is open. So I think it's really interesting that we haven't seen more companies price and go public. Many cases, especially in venture capital, the last round financing is the valuation methodology that is used, and that last round of financing won't reset until they price another round. And so we are seeing lots of companies that are held at valuations that are not actually reasonable, and there will need to be a reckoning.
Where in, say, private credit is the most interesting? And how do you look at it? Is it like industry-based? Is it, like, how do you break it down into buckets?
Yep. So we are looking at things like distressed debt, which is really looking to take advantage of truly
the type of
distressed
financing,
situations.
Not necessarily like sector-based or anything along those lines.
Well, and then we're also, pretty interested in asset-backed lending, so ABL investing, and so there are a number of other areas and ways to play this, but I would say that direct lending is becoming more and more mainstream and less of a premium there.
When I got to the board at a large university, I was shocked to see how much is allocated to private equity and private alternatives, broadly defined. Not the 10 to 15% that I grew up with. Yeah. 40.
Yes.
And more.
And I've been in that seat. I've worked at an endowment.
And I'm like, so in 2022 comes along, 2023, I'm like, where are the marks down, kids?
Yeah.
Didn't get a mark down.
Yeah.
It's such a scam, that private business. They don't mark. That's why I'm so shocked that they allocate so much to that. Are you surprised that universities have taken such an aggressive view of their portfolio as it relates to alternatives?
I'm not surprised. As I mentioned earlier, the return premium is there over public markets. You do need a chief investment officer mindset when you're allocating capital to private equity. So you don't want to lock up your capital in just any investment. You want to make sure that you're being paid to lock up your capital, and you can do that looking at public market equivalents or other measures. These universities and public pensions, for that matter, have pretty lofty return targets, and they need to get there. The thing to look at is how much of the operating budget is the institution supporting? Is it 30, 40, 50%? And if it is, then be really careful with your liquidity guardrails. And that's something that we do for our clients at NEPC. It's a number of simple but very powerful metrics to understand if we get out over our skis. And if we had those in place prior to 2008, a lot of heartache would have been avoided.
That's really interesting. Hey, Sarah, really great stuff.
Really
Really
good.
appreciate you coming in. Sarah Samuels, we will definitely be seeing you soon, joining us from NEPC. Thank you so very much. One of the top stories in the Bloomberg terminal continues to be the trauma that's unfolding right now in South Korea. The headline earlier was South Korea declares martial law. However, lawmakers have now voted to request the lifting of the martial law. The president says that martial law, though, is necessary because of political deadlock over the budget. It's confusing. It's moving the FX market. We want to get more for you. Joining us now is Daniel Ten-Kate. Joining us, he's Asia EcoGov Executive Editor, Economic Government Executive Editor. Hey, Dan, can you just help us understand the last 12 hours?
Yeah, I mean, we're still trying to figure it out. But essentially, the president kind of stunned the nation with this late-night power grab, where he declared martial law for the first time in decades, and Korea has a long history of that, and essentially banned all political activity, banned parliament, etc., claiming there were North Korea sympathizers that he had to take down. In reality, he lost the parliament election in April, and ever since then he hasn't had a majority in parliament. And the opposition party is doing what opposition parties do around the world, which is, try and block his initiatives and push their own initiatives through. So he's had a bit of divided government there. It sort of came to a head with a vote on the budget. They were demanding different things, and then he just pulled this move, which even his own party is condemning at the moment. So you had opposition lawmakers race to Parliament. They voted to ask him to withdraw the request for martial law. According to the Constitution, that means he must comply with the request. There is some legal ambiguity now that they're trying to work through. We haven't heard from him since Parliament voted, so we're not sure if he'll comply. But people are coming on the streets. There was some clashes with police. Overall, fairly calm on the streets that we could see right now.
Right.
But the big question now is whether he'll comply and drop this whole thing.
I have to ask the question, Daniel, but who has the support of the armed forces of South Korea?
Well, that's a big question right now. It's unclear if the army is going to back him to the extent, if you get mass protests, are they going to, start shooting in the streets or something like that? I mean, that's a big question. And we've seen in Asia a couple other places where the army has refused to do that this year. Bangladesh, in particular, was one. It doesn't appear like it's coming to that yet, although we'll have to see what the next few hours and days bring. But that's an open question at the moment.
So I guess, okay, let's just pretend that the president says, okay, you guys are repealing martial law, fine. Then what happens? Because we're still clearly at a standstill, and clearly this is a big negotiating tactic that the president was using to get his agenda passed. So then what happens? If the government is in paralysis, what gives?
Well, I mean, they were negotiating a budget, so his view of paralysis and what's actually taking place on the ground are two different things. It looks, there's already people calling for him to be impeached after this. His own ruling party is condemning his move. He's very unpopular anyway. So, it's very likely we could see support for him plummet, and he could be impeached and thrown out of office that way. That looks the way it's going, unless the army were to back him and he were to kind of bend the Constitution, which, so far we haven't seen, but we're perilously on the brink of that.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, Daniel, thank you so much for your reporting. Really appreciate it. Daniel Ten-Kate, he is Asia Economic and Government Executive Editor for Bloomberg News. He is based in Hong Kong. For those of you that have a terminal, Top Go, and you kind of get to T Live, and boy, this Top Live blog is that's where we're getting all information, real up-to-date information from reporters on the ground in that part of the world here. So we will certainly keep you up to date on that. Markets here, S&P 500 off 6 points, the Dow off 142, NASDAQ up 45. So the markets are just kind of churning here. 10-year Treasury, 4.21%. That's up 2 basis points. We'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg Intelligence. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:40 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. South Korea's president declared martial law, saying the opposition's been trying to paralyze his administration with impeachment attempts. Lawmakers there have voted to request they lift the martial law. Now, South Korean officials have said they'll provide unlimited liquidity to markets if necessary. The won now down 1.25%, trading at 14.22 against the dollar. Job openings in the U.S. picked up in October, suggesting demand for workers is stabilizing after steep declines in recent months. The Bureau of Labor Statistics JOLT survey shows available positions increased to 7.74 million. That's from a revised 7.37 million reading in September. And that's what traders were actually watching for. We check markets for you all day long. At Bloomberg, the S&P 500 now down 0.2%. NASDAQ is flat, and the Dow is down 0.4%. The Russell 2000 index down 0.8%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.21%, and the 2-year yield at 4.18%. BlackRock has agreed to buy HPS Investment Partners in an all-stock deal valued at roughly $12 billion, a purchase that will propel the world's largest asset manager into the highest ranks of private credit. BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink.
The planned combination will scale our offering to a top 5 private credit franchise and differentiated investment performance.
BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink there. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's go back now to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul and Alex.
All right, thanks so much, Amy Morris. Really appreciate that. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio, where we bring you all the top news in business and economics and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. They cover 2,000 companies in 130 industries all around the world. And every day we check in with our Bloomberg Big Take story. It's a deep dive through our deep bench of Bloomberg reporters and editors all around the world. And they get into one issue and they go deep and they give really great perspective. And today it's on Stellantis. So it's the departure of one of the most feared men in the auto industry. That's how Carlos Tavares was described in the piece. And it really reflects the struggles of this automaker trying to retool for an EV era in a world of increased competition in China, where manufacturing for cars has really left Europe and has gone elsewhere. Truly staggering development over the last few decades. Gabrielle Coppola is Bloomberg Auto's reporter, and she joins us now. It was a great story, Gabrielle. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for coming on. I didn't know that Carlos Tavares was really feared and scared, and everyone was scared of him. Can you just walk me through what his reputation has been?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I think I kind of divide it between before and after he took the helm of Stellantis. Before, I think he was kind of admired and revered in the auto industry among other auto executives because he'd been able to pull off these turnarounds that other executives kind of marveled at. I remember hearing about when, Stellantis was formed from the merger of Fiat Chrysler and France's Peugeot. And when they were doing the merger and they were looking at the margins that Tavares had been able to reach in his turnaround of Opel, which he bought from GM in Europe, their European brand at Peugeot, they said, wow, how does this guy do this? Wow, he's a magician. And I think for the first couple years, that reputation continued because he came out with 10% margins a year after the merger. There were great synergies for investors. Everyone said, wow, he's great. And, he always, his style of speech was always very acute. Talk about how much he loves his employees or the profound love and respect he has for all the workers at Stellantis. But on the flip side, he was incredibly ruthless in cost cutting and would just go sort of super extreme measures with suppliers, with the unions, with dealers. It was sort of just like my way or the highway, and didn't really seem very open to feedback. And the cost cutting was just relentless. And that, in the end, I think is what kind of sowed the seeds of his downfall. Was he cut too deeply, and he just caused a lot of friction with all these different kind of stakeholders that you need to work with to, build cars. And I forgot to mention governments. I mean, oh my gosh, the Italian government not happy with Stellantis at all,
Gabrielle, how much of the problem at Stellantis is Stellantis specific as opposed to just what the auto industry is going through as it tries to navigate, this transition to electric vehicles, which is a challenge for auto companies around the world, it seems like.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. This is a challenging environment for everybody. The auto business is never easy, but this feels like a double, triple whammy of, the rise of China, electrification, more software in cars. Those are all really big secular changes. But I think, I think it's having the effect of kind of the tide going out. When times are tough, you see what managers are really made of. And I think, Tavares thought he was going to be one of the big winners of all this transition because he believed that he could get costs down and improve efficiency and just have enough cash to kind of fund the transition. But it is a Stellantis problem because look at in the U.S. I mean, the car market is holding up decently here in the United States. You don't see, GM is making money, like Toyota, Hyundai doing great. Where's Stellantis? They've lost their their market share in the third quarter. They had a 20% drop, and they've fallen to, I think, number 6. They used to be, GM, Toyota, Ford, Stellantis. Now Hyundai jumped on top of them. Honda jumped in front of them. That is due to mismanagement. You cannot blame this all on the environment. As much as Tavares used to blame EV regulations or tough fuel economy requirements, yes, those are all challenges that every car maker is dealing with, but this is definitely partially a self-inflicted wound.
So did they just not make the right cars? Like in the cost-cutting mode, did they just cut spending on the wrong cars?
Yes and no. I actually think their strategy could end up being okay. On paper, the strategy looks good because they built. His whole thing was, the auto industry is all about scale. So they went from having many different car platforms that are very expensive to consolidating to just 4. And they launched all these new vehicles on those 4 platforms, and they call them multi-energy, meaning they're designed for EVs, but you can also put a hybrid powertrain in there or a gas powertrain. So that was going to be the height of efficiency. The problem was execution. The problem was that he cut so deep, and you lost so much institutional knowledge, and you pissed off all their suppliers, and you weren't able to get parts on time, or you're getting cheap stuff that doesn't hold up, and yes, also launching new vehicles. Their new electric Ram pickup truck has been delayed. It was supposed to be out end of this year. Now it's coming second half of 2025. The Jeep Wagoneer S, which was the first electric Jeep to come to the U.S. fully electric, is late. So I think what happened is they had a great plan, but the execution, because I think he really kind of starved or cut off the company's ability to launch because he lost so many important people because he just said cut. Right. On the other hand, yes, I would say that there is a hole in the product line. They discontinued the Jeep Cherokee, which is like the most popular segment in the EV market in the U.S., and they have nothing to fill it until next summer. So that's a function of starving the brand of resources.
Gabrielle, so get rid of your CEO. I guess that's kind of the easy thing, but they don't have another one to put in there, do they? Where are they on finding a new leader?
Yeah, well, I think, my colleague, especially Albertina Torsoli in Paris, who has broken a ton of news on this story, John Elkann, who is the scion of the Agnelli family that founded Fiat in Italy in the 1890s, they started a search for a successor back, this fall after this kind of horrific, there was a board meeting in October where Tavares had to fight for his job, and then after that, Elkann was already searching. But now Elkann has implemented a new kind of temporary management committee to run the company. It's going to have around 8 or 10 people, and I think on that committee there are some potential successors. One is Antonio Filosa, who is an Italian guy who was very successful running Fiat Chrysler in South America for many years. He's a protege of Sergio Marchionne, who's almost worshipped as he's a legend. He's a hero here in Detroit for bringing Chrysler back from the dead. That guy is now running Jeep and North America, and North America is the market that they have got to fix. So he could be one candidate. There's Maxime Picat, who's a French executive who runs a purchasing supply chain in France. And there's people from outside the company. I think they're looking internally and externally. They've said they're going to complete the search by the first half of 2025. I think we'll have a CEO before then because you don't want to let this drag on for too long.
Hey, Gabrielle, it was really great. That was amazing reporting. It was a really good story. Check it out on the Big Take on the Bloomberg Terminal, Bloomberg.com/Big Take. You definitely don't want to miss it. Gabrielle Coppola, Bloomberg Autos reporter, joining us on that ruling by committee until you get a new CEO. Sounds great. It sounds... how hard is parenting with just 2 of you? Imagine ruling with more by committee with that. All right, coming up, we're going to talk to Matthew Schettenhelm, Bloomberg Intelligence media litigation analyst. This is Bloomberg.
is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Happy Tuesday. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We cover all the top news in business, economics, and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. They cover 2,000 companies in 130 industries all around the world. You know what's going to make some headlines soon? That is TikTok. So apparently, TikTok is likely to get a key decree from the D.C. Circuit on the morning of December 3rd or 6th, so we didn't get it today, so maybe the 6th, in a court challenge to the U.S. sale or ban law. Either TikTok's banned or they got to sell off their U.S. assets. So we wanted to get more on this with Matthew Schettenhelm, Bloomberg Intelligence media litigation analyst. Matthew, pretending that I've not been up to date on the TikTok sale or ban rule, what am I looking for? What's the deal here?
Yeah, so the deal here is that Congress passed a law earlier this year that effectively will ban TikTok in the United States as of January 19th. Unless ByteDance divests the company. And ByteDance has said, look, it's not practical for us to do that. We're not going to pursue that. And so all the eggs are in this court challenging the constitutionality of the law that Congress passed. We should get a decision, as you said, from the D.C. Circuit. It didn't come this morning, and this court decides cases on Tuesday and Friday mornings most often, so that makes Friday morning the most likely candidate when we'll hear whether TikTok can stop this ban, whether its First Amendment challenge to the law is going to succeed or not.
I know you want to assign percentages to things. Which way do you think they'll go? How do you think this is going to play out?
Yeah, so the best read we got on how these three judges are thinking about this came at the September 16th oral argument when both sides were hit with questions. And walking out of that argument, if you were TikTok, you were not feeling very good, because the questioning from those three judges suggested that they were inclined to defer to the United States on this national security question. And say that TikTok doesn't have as broad of First Amendment rights to block this sort of legislation as TikTok seemed to think. So coming out of it, we gave a pretty strong advantage to the United States to uphold this law. It's an interesting question whether Trump's views on this issue, President Trump's views on this issue, might soften some of those judges and maybe give him an out and leave an out in how they write this decision. But coming out of that argument in September, if you're TikTok, you weren't feeling very good. We gave a strong edge to the United States.
So if that winds up happening, what does that look like? Like legally, how is all of this enforced?
Yeah, so the way the law operates is that it says it doesn't strip TikTok off everyone's phone on January 19th or January 20th. The way it works is that it says no company can host TikTok on servers or on app stores in a way that allows the app to continue to be updated and maintained for United States users. And if companies continue to do that, despite what the law says, they risk enormous liability by doing so. So I suspect that once that law hits, even though it won't have an immediate shutdown of TikTok, and TikTok might try to host it offshore and in other jurisdictions, I suspect TikTok's competitors are going to emphasize the risks of continuing to use TikTok in that environment.
So you mentioned President-elect Trump. Do we have any idea how he thinks about this topic?
Well, yeah, he's had a couple passing comments to, he was the first one in support of a TikTok ban during his first administration, but he's since reversed course completely on that and now says he doesn't want to help Meta by supporting a ban. The problem is that Congress already passed this law. The law is on the books, and it's unlikely that President Trump is going to get Congress to completely reverse itself on such an issue. So his best chance, if President Trump wants a say here, his best chance is TikTok winning this court case, which would then force Congress to try again, and then President Trump wouldn't have to sign that second try.
Oh, that's interesting. If TikTok gets a ruling it doesn't like, are there like multiple more court stuff they can do? That's technical term, court stuff.
Yeah, not multiple. There are two options left on the table. It can go for what's known as en banc review at the D.C. Circuit, not just asking three judges, but the full slate of judges at that court to rethink it. I'm not sure that's really likely here given the limited time before the ban takes effect. Most likely what TikTok will do is run to the U.S. Supreme Court and go on what's known as the shadow docket, where they ask for a stay of the deadline and say to the justices, you need to hit pause on this January 19th deadline to let us litigate this case before you, this important First Amendment question. So they'll be asking the justices to hit pause on that deadline so that the court can take up the issue, probably, I would say, by June of this year. That's going to be their last chance to dodge the deadline, I would think, if they lose at the D.C. Circuit.
Once again, the lawyers win.
This is the whole time in my life I've known David Weston. That has been his whole thing.
Once again.
The lawyers win no matter what, no matter who's president at the end of the day. All right, Matt, thanks a lot. Matthew Schettenhelm joining us from Bloomberg Intelligence. He's a media litigation analyst. So clearly that's what Paul and I will be doing on Friday, December 6th, talking about jobs and clearly talking about TikTok and a ban or a sale here in the U.S. Just want to recap here the headlines crossing from South Korea. South Korean president declared martial law and an emergency address earlier today. Then lawmakers recently voted to request the lifting of the martial law. Now, the president says the martial law is necessary because of political deadlock. The won did pair losses after it fell to its weakest since 2009, and the Bank of Korea has pledged unlimited liquidity support to the markets. We don't yet know what the president and the military will now do since the request from lawmakers to lift lift martial law. We are waiting for any headlines and details on that. No doubt we'll be following that throughout the day here on Bloomberg Television and Radio. All right, that wraps it up for me and Paul. Coming up, Balance of Power with Joe Matthews up next.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Steve Kathan. Protesters in South Korea rally outside the country's parliament as lawmakers vote to block a sudden move by President Yoon.
Dear citizens, I hereby declare martial law to protect the Republic of Korea from the threats posed by North Korean communist forces.
South Korea is a key American ally in Asia. CBS's Charlie Daggett is at the Pentagon, where officials are monitoring what's going on.
The U.S. National Security Council said they're monitoring. The same can be said from officials here at the Pentagon. I think as far as the Pentagon DOD is concerned, we have to see whether this is because of an external threat or more likely an internal threat.
South Korea's president is conservative. His political opponents control the parliament. Here at home, new allegations of earlier misbehavior have not stopped President-elect Trump's defense secretary pick, Pete Hegseth, from meeting with many Senate Republicans. CBS's Scott McFarland's on Capitol Hill.
He's got at least a half dozen appointments on his calendar. He's going room to room here at the Capitol complex. He is meeting only with Trump's most ardent allies, what we would characterize as the Senate's political low-hanging fruit.
Several feet of snow, just part of the pre-winter misery in some parts of the Great Lakes states. The Weather Channel's Stephanie Abrams says bitter cold is now settling in.
A clipper is going to clip through the Great Lakes starting tonight into Thursday. Winds will gust 40 to 50 miles an hour. That's going to cause blowing snow. It's going to drop visibility and also give us our wind chills below zero, well below zero at that. Through Friday, 5 to 8 plus inches of snow is going to fall.
Well, CBS's Jim Krasula reports on a court ruling on one state's sweeping abortion law.
A federal appeals court has ruled that most of Idaho's law that makes it illegal to help minors get an abortion without their parents' consent can take effect while a lawsuit challenging its constitutionality continues. The court did block part of the law that prohibits so-called recruiting a minor to get an abortion.
Well, from Detroit, Jeff Gilbert at affiliate WWJ has more on an expanded recall by GM.
The problem is unique to heavy-duty Silverados and Sierras 2024 models with manual tailgates that have power unlock and release. Water can short-circuit the system. GM has had 237 complaints. Dealers will replace the touchpad and switch assemblies.
The agribusiness company Cargill says it's cutting 5% of its global workforce. Wall Street's, right now the Dow is down 159 points. This is CBS News.
love.
Wild story in Illinois where a pregnant woman called 911 to say her car would not stop. CBS's Elise Preston.
My car won't stop. My brakes aren't working.
A panicked 911 call.
I'm 20 weeks pregnant. I cannot die today.
Turn right at the next road, okay?
I can't stop.
If you don't turn, you're going to go into a lake.
Deputies jumped into action on a dark rural road southeast of St. Louis.
Their brake lights were illuminating, and she was not slowing down.
Deputy Tyler Coffey was driving right behind her.
Once I got in front of her vehicle, slowed down.
I'm going to hit the cop. I'm going to hit him.
And then her bumpers met mine, and slowly we came to a stop.
I didn't mean to. I swear.
No, they know. Hey, ma'am, it's okay. They know.
The driver and her dog, who was in the car, were both unharmed, and deputies say there was very little damage to either car.
I'm Steve Kathan, CBS News.
From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
They're walking the halls of power as we speak. Welcome to the fastest show in politics. As Donald Trump's picks for Treasury and Defense Secretary meet with senators who will decide their fate a couple of weeks from now. We'll have the latest on Scott Bessent, Pete Hegseth's chances, and the overall confirmation process with an expert. Republican analyst Ashley Davis from West Front Strategies is with us right off the top here on Balance of Power. 17 days now until the government runs out of money. And no, I did not use the word shutdown, but we'll tackle the funding issue ahead with Nathan Dean at Bloomberg Intelligence with analysis today from our signature panel. We've got an eye on South Korea and the story today, martial law. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us for the hour. We'll also have Kristen Hahn from Rock Solutions. So let's get started. As always, on Wall Street, we set the baseline right now with Amy Morris. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Joe. We are watching what's going on in South Korea. The won is weakened sharply on news that President Yoon declared martial law. It's now down 1.7%, trading at 14.28 against the dollar. South Korean officials have said they'll provide unlimited liquidity to markets if they have to. Leo Kogwan is one of Tesla's largest individual shareholders. He says now he's paring his stake in the automaker, putting some proceeds into government debt. He's aiming to hedge his portfolio, fearing a potential stock market crash like back in 1929. Tesla shares are now down 1.7%. Job openings rose more than expected in October, so did quit rates. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, you know it as JOLTS, shows available positions increased to 7.74 million from a revised 7.37 million in September. Checking the markets for you, the S&P 500 is down 0.2%. NASDAQ is flat. The Dow down 0.3%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's get into Balance of Power with Joe Matthew.
Yeah, let's do it. Amy Morris, thank you so much. Watching Wall Street for us as we bring you the fastest show in politics. Live from Washington. Hey, you made it to Tuesday. All right, we're getting there. The Tuesday edition on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite radio, and on YouTube, where you can find us right now. Search Bloomberg Business News Live. Because as always, we've got a lot to catch up on. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining. Here's the baseline when it comes to politics today. President Biden wrapping things up in Africa. He's in Angola, where he wraps the trip. 3-day trip done today. The Trans-Africa Summit wrapping things up today before he gets on Air Force One and heads back to Washington. Congress also coming back to Washington. Senators, members of the House flying in last night, and today we actually get down to business. Senate's already in session. The House will get back to it tonight. We've got a funding deadline. You know, if you listen to this program, the deal there. No one's talking about a shutdown, so when you see the countdown clocks later on cable news, you can sound smart at the cocktail party. We don't, however, have a deal, and we'll get to that later this hour with Nathan Dean, who, yes, of course, is running odds on a shutdown. Now, while lawmakers are doing this dance on Capitol Hill, Donald Trump's picks for defense and treasury are doing their own dance on the Senate side. You know how this works. You get the Sherpa, they bring you through the meetings, and you actually sit down in the office with the senators who are going to be deciding your fate. That's an easier job for some than others right now. Ask Matt Gaetz. And there's a big difference between Scott Bessent today and Pete Hegseth. as the walls start to close in a little bit more around Donald Trump's choice to run the Pentagon. Remembering, this is a military combat veteran, also a veteran of Fox News, and he's facing a series of allegations involving sexual assault, which he was asked about again today as he made his way through the corridors in the Senate. Reporters have one question on their mind. Here it is.
How do you feel about the women in combat?
Amazing women who serve in our military. Amazing women.
Do you think they should be in combat?
I think they're already in combat.
I think they're already in combat. He's talking about women in combat. It's not just the sexual assaults. It's what role women should play in the Pentagon. As he just said, we have amazing women who serve in the military. I think they're already in combat, when asked if he thinks they should be. This is where we follow the bouncing ball today with Ashley Davis. I was delighted to hear that Ashley was coming on with us. Of course, a Republican strategist, but an insider when it comes to national security and this idea of subverting FBI background checks. I've got a lot of questions for Ashley, principal at West Front Strategies, former special assistant to the director of Homeland Security. Ashley, it's great to have you back. This is quite the dance to witness, no matter who the candidate is. But I wonder your thoughts now that Matt Gaetz is out of the picture. Does all the fire now turn to Pete Hegseth?
Well, that's what it looks like's happening right now. Obviously, if you've seen who he's been meeting with up to this point, they've been more on the friendly side in regard true Trump believers. I mean, Senator Tuberville yesterday. And so there have been the support that he needs from them. However, you've seen a lot of Republican senators say they want to make sure that they see his full vetted FBI background check. And to kind of answer that question, which I think is really important, is if President Trump says we're not going to do a background check on this, these senators have the ability to just say, then fine, if we don't get it, then we're not going to vote for him. And remember, he can only lose really 3 votes, and we don't know where Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Elisa Murkowski will be. So these senators can really vote with what they say if they really want an FBI background check. And obviously that's standard procedure. So I would think that you see that happening.
Well, so, okay, let's get into that for a minute because, Ashley, you know a lot more about this than most Americans, having had a security clearance, having worked in national security in the Bush administration and what became the Homeland Security Department. Is Donald Trump about to set a new normal? Because there is a standoff here between the transition team that does not trust the FBI and the senators, in the case of Senator Wicker, for instance, running a committee that's got to clear the next Secretary of Defense, sees this rather differently. These senators want the traditional FBI background check. Where's this going? How's this going to break?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the senators have the power here because if they don't get the FBI background check, then they can say very easily, then we're not going to vote for them. And so, they kind of have that threat to be able to do that in order to get the FBI background check. If you even look at Joni Ernst, who women in the military is very important topic for her. She's on the Armed Services Committee, which the DoD secretary will go through as for the first, part of the nomination process. And she also has been a big vocal supporter of making sure that the assault on women in the military is dealt with in the proper way. So what she has said publicly several times is she really looks forward to the background checks that Hegseth will have. So if she doesn't get those background checks, she can just be like, hey, then I'm not voting for him. So I do think they have the ability to play chicken here a little bit with the president-elect.
You know what they're talking about here? It's not they, it's Jonathan Martin. You see this piece today, Politico? He took to Twitter with the idea that Hegseth goes down surrounded by scandal involving sexual assault allegations, his ideas about women in combat. And to the rescue is Senator Joni Ernst, of course, his potential foil here. She's a veteran who has made a great issue of sexual assault in the military. Would she not be the smartest pick if Pete Hegseth doesn't work out here? Because she would sail through confirmation, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm obviously I'm a huge fan of her, so I'm very biased about that question, but I think she would be wonderful. There are the dynamics of when, at that point, a governor would have to appoint a senator, a temporary senator. So how long does that process, would that take in Iowa? I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. So, there is this point of getting tax reform done early on in the administration. So you don't want to have empty Senate seats either, which would be something that could potentially work against her if that would be open for a while.
Interesting. If Donald Trump gets nominees like Pete Hegseth through committee without an FBI background check, realizing that may not be what happens here, to your point, senators have the leverage. But if that took place, would he not be able to simply give them the background check or the security clearance, rather, once they got into the White House? He did that with Jared Kushner in his first term. He could, just as president, give everyone security clearance, right?
Yes, I mean, I guess in theory, obviously he can as president. I agree with you, and I think many people that are listening right now would agree that I understand the point that he doesn't trust the FBI for various reasons. However, there is a process in place, and one of the main issues when you go through these security clearances is obviously the general stuff that you would think, that you haven't done anything horrible in your past. But one of the most important things is the financial, any financial issues that you would have, that you would be a target to foreign governments to take bribes. And so that, to me, with some of the people that, that are obviously serving presidents, no matter who it is probably one of the most important things, because you're not going to really normally nominate someone that has criminal pasts, but this whole financial aspect is something that's really important for some of these nominees.
Yeah. Well, okay, and well stated here. When it comes to the various levels of security clearance, I know you could give us a clinic on this, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but how many are there? If you're going to run an agency like the Pentagon, for instance, or a law enforcement agency like the FBI, that would require obviously the highest. But when we start talking about Scott Bessent, for instance, some of the other nominees, how many different shades of clearances are there?
Well, there's a very interesting fact here, which I learned when I was going through mine. So the normal or top secret, and then top something called TSSCI, which is a higher level, which is kind of what someone like the Secretary of Treasury would get. So it's a high level, higher than top secret, which is more the general clearance. But the interesting dynamic here are there's
welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive
that you can get, and so that means that you can read into certain programs throughout the federal government, and there's not one person, including the President of the United States, that has the ability to read into every single code program in the country. So, like Treasury, for example, has they deal with a lot of terrorism insurance or terrorism funding through the department. So obviously those programs the Secretary of Treasury would be read into, but he's not necessarily going to be read into programs of something that's happening in the ground war in Afghanistan. Yeah. So there's but someone like DOD, he would be read into obviously all of the different programs that the Department of Defense would be involved in. However, he may not necessarily be read into programs that have to do with critical infrastructure in the United States.
Fascinating. That's why we have Ashley Davis join us.
Yeah,
You're
really
not going to hear this anywhere else. Well, it sure is, because we're talking about this every day here, and it kind of helps when you know what you're talking about. Keep this in mind when you hear about these confirmation hearings and the security clearances that come with the FBI background check. Ashley, it's great to have you back, as always. Ashley will join us on the late edition of Balance of Power as part of our panel. West Front Strategies Republican strategist Nathan Dean's on the way in next. We'll look at the chances of a shutdown. Just don't call it a shutdown yet. This is Bloomberg.
My general advice is continue to seek out companies or people
that are maybe one stage or two stages ahead of you. And I think this is generalizable to not just to startups, but anyone seeking fast growth in their own professional lives, in their careers too. What does greatness look like? Try to seek out people who've been there, done that before, and then try to not connect with one, but try to interview 3, 5, 10 people to see what is a general pattern of greatness that look like that will get you to the next level of the company, next stage, maybe a year, 12 months from now, 24 months from now. Seek out people who kind of went down the path a few times. Then you'll start to find this pattern that start to emerge. What are things that you need to have 12 months from now, 24 months from now that you currently don't have? Then try to like build a path towards that. It's almost like Amazon's or Jeff Bezos' mantra of working backwards. Think about what your end game or next stage look like, and then figure out your steps to getting there, and who do you need to work with, upgrading or coaching your existing team or recruiting from somewhere else to really level your leadership. Because ultimately, the job of a CEO is to do 3 things, right? One is get the strategy right for your company, making sure it's executed, get the right teams onboarded, getting the resources, whether it be fundraising or allocating your resources. So it's strategy, people, or team, figuring out how you need to navigate those things to get to the next level.
When I was younger, I used to be in bands. I'd play drums in bands and toured America with them. Did a lot of session drumming, recorded albums. So yeah, it was good fun doing the drumming. The only reason I stopped it, well, I still play, but not as serious as I did when I was younger. But drumming doesn't pay the bills. I was never good enough to be able to pay the bills with it, but it was good fun. I started RJF, and the reason I started it was I saw a gap in the market for particular early stage and startup businesses. With the experience that I've got of running businesses, of being a finance director at the very biggest companies in the world to being finance director of small startups, we were looking at providing more than just basic accountancy services. So yes, we'll do all that. We'll do all the basic, all the statutory side of things that you need to do. But there's so much more value that we can add, and I wanted to have my experience to help these startups, because a lot of them don't really know where to go. You can go to your high street accountants and they can do a good job compliance-wise, but you would question whether they've actually been in the fire line of a business. Have you been in a business where you're thinking, how do I pay wages next week? Or business is really successful, what do we do with it next? Or how do we grow it? How do we grow into international territories? Or how do we grow our markets? How do we expand? So a lot of the experience I've seen over the years and seen different types of business in different sectors, I thought, well, it's a real value that I can add to these businesses as opposed to just being an FD, because a lot of these businesses can't afford an FD. But if we can take care of their statutory side of things, the compliance side of things, I'm on hand to be able to help and advise businesses with their growth strategy, or if they're in difficulty, help them through these times.
Another deep dive. This time, we're going to be talking about SG Trader AI.
Okay.
It's this new mobile app that's been kind of making waves in the startup world.
Interesting.
You know, kind of imagine if you're a startup founder, right? You have that amazing idea.
Right.
But actually getting investors to buy in, it feels like you're climbing Mount Everest.
Oh, yeah.
So SG Trader AI, this app, it might just be like your Sherpa.
Okay. Yeah.
We're going to be talking about how this thing helps startups make these awesome video pitches. The kind that really get the investors saying, yes, I'm in.
I see.
And we'll also look into like what really makes it different from everything else out there.
Right.
So what's really cool about this SG Trader AI, I think, is that it's not just about making a video.
Yeah.
It's about giving you this like edge in the whole fundraising game.
I see.
It uses AI to like really look at your startup and make sure your pitch is spot on. Now, I have to admit, when I first heard about this Retrieval Augmented Generation Framework, or RA, I was kind of intimidated. To be honest, it sounds a little complicated.
Oh, yeah. It can sound that way.
Can you maybe like break that down for us? What is that? in simple terms.
Okay, sure.
And why is it such a big deal for creating a killer pitch?
So imagine you're like a chef, right?
Okay, I like where this is going.
And you've got this amazing recipe book.
Yeah.
That's like your AI model, like ChatGPT or Perplexity, one of those.
Gotcha.
Your ingredients. That's your startups data, the latest trends, all that.
I see.
And Harji, it brings together that recipe and those ingredients to make this like totally unique dish.
Interesting.
And that dish, it's your pitch script.
So it's not giving like generic advice.
Yeah.
It actually understands your startup and what investors want.
Exactly. It knows what's going to click with them.
That's amazing. So it's like having your own pitch coach who knows exactly what each investor's looking for.
Right. You got it.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
What's that?
We looked into some of the other video platforms out there.
Okay, yeah.
Competitors like Temi, Beautiful.ai,
Right.
Vidyard.
Right.
And, you know, none of them have this AI-powered script writing.
No, they don't.
It's like they're missing that secret ingredient.
It makes a huge difference.
From your experience, how big of an advantage is that for startups, especially new ones just starting out?
Well, for those early stage startups, it's a complete game changer.
Yeah.
Because they usually have limited budgets, resources.
Tough, yeah.
And putting together a really strong pitch, it's a big challenge.
It's huge.
It's like trying to convince someone to invest in your dream without having that perfect way to say it.
It's like, here's my dream, just trust me.
Exactly. This AI tool removes that whole hurdle.
Right.
So entrepreneurs can just focus on what matters.
Building their product, growing their business.
Exactly.
I totally agree. And, you know, speaking of making things easier, I love that this is a mobile app.
Oh, yeah. It's super convenient.
Like, you just need your phone. That's it.
Yep.
To make these pro videos. No fancy cameras, no studio rentals. You could be, like, at a coffee shop.
And still make it look awesome.
And make it look like a Hollywood production.
It's amazing, right?
That accessibility is key, especially for startups that are bootstrapping it.
It really levels the playing field.
Yeah.
So everybody has a chance to present a polished, professional pitch.
That's no matter what their budget is.
Right. You don't need a whole film crew to look credible anymore.
And it's not just making the pitch, is it?
No, there's more.
SG Trader AI, it takes it a step further. It helps you get it in front of the right people.
Exactly.
They have their own live stream channel with a massive audience.
I know, it's crazy.
Over 25,000 subscribers and 100,000 daily views.
That's huge exposure.
That's insane. Plus, you can instantly share your pitch with their network of, like, angel investors, VCs.
Yeah, it's great.
To me, that sounds like a shortcut to all that networking.
Yeah.
You know, trying to get in front of investors.
It can be a real grind.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's definitely more efficient.
Yeah.
In the past, startups had to do all these networking events, cold emails, all that hustle.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
I know, right?
So does SG Trader AI really streamline that?
It does. It gives you that direct line to investors who are actively looking.
They're already interested.
Exactly. It's like having a fast pass to the front of the line.
Love that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes out the guesswork and the legwork.
A lot of it, yeah.
From what I see, SG Trader AI doesn't stop there.
Nope. They keep going.
They put everything you need. Script writing, recording, editing, even reaching out to investors.
All in one app.
All in one app.
It's pretty amazing.
It's amazing.
It solves a big problem.
It does.
Think about it. Before this, you had to use all these different platforms and services.
To do each individual thing.
Yeah, just to get your pitch ready and seen by the right people.
A recipe for a total headache.
Especially when you're already juggling a million things as a founder.
They really streamlined all of that into one easy app. That's got to be so valuable.
I know, absolutely. Having everything in one place.
Yes.
Saves time, reduces stress.
Yeah.
Lets you focus on the important stuff, your startup.
Your passion.
Right. It's like a Swiss Army knife for fundraising, but instead of blades, it's all these digital tools.
I love it. The Swiss Army knife of fundraising.
Exactly. And it's all geared towards helping you succeed.
Now, while we were looking into all this, we noticed some competitors have, like, similar features.
Oh, yeah.
Like basic editing or investor databases, that kind of thing.
Right.
But none of them seem to offer this whole package, this all-in-one solution, like SG Trader AI.
They don't.
It's like they went above and beyond to really make something just for startups.
They did. It's a really smart move.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, by focusing on startups specifically, they've made a product that really gets their unique challenges.
So it's not a generic video thing trying to be everything to everyone.
Exactly. It's a specialized tool made with that startup journey in mind.
You mentioned earlier that SG Trader AI can actually tailor the pitch script
Yeah,
to different kinds of investors.
that's right.
That really caught my attention. Can you give us like a real world example of how that works?
Sure. So imagine a startup, they're focused on sustainable agriculture.
Okay.
If they're pitching to an impact investor, someone who cares about, social responsibility,
Right. Making a difference.
SG Trader AI can really play up those angles.
I see.
Like how their tech saves water or helps local farmers.
So it's like the app speaks impact investor fluently.
It's a great way to put it. It knows what matters to them.
So no more one size fits all pitches. You're customizing it to what each investor values.
It's about resonating with their interests.
That's amazing.
Now, let's say you're pitching to a VC who's big on AI.
Okay, yeah.
SG Trader AI, it can look at their portfolio, what they've invested in before, and tailor the pitch to highlight your startup's AI side.
It's speaking the investor's language.
Exactly. It's about showing why your startup is perfect for their strategy.
It's like SG Trader AI takes out all the guesswork in figuring out what they want to hear.
It makes it so much easier to target your pitch.
Almost like a secret weapon in the fundraising game. As we've been talking, I can't help but think
What's that?
this would have been so useful when I was starting out.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that way.
Fundraising is tough. Anything to give you an edge is huge.
It is. And SG Trader AI is a great example of how tech can help.
Empower entrepreneurs.
Exactly. To navigate all the complexities of fundraising with more, confidence.
Yeah, and a solid strategy.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot. Let's recap what makes SG Trader AI stand out.
Okay, yeah.
AI-powered script writing tailored to investors.
Right.
Making videos right on your phone.
Super accessible.
Direct access to a network of investors who are ready to go.
That's key.
And an all-in-one platform to streamline everything.
It's all there.
It's like they combined a Hollywood studio, a matchmaking service, and a project management tool.
All for startups. It's a powerful combination.
It is. What makes it so strong is how all those pieces work together, right?
Exactly. It's not just the individual features, it's how they create a whole solution.
Addressing those pain points, startups face every step of the way.
Throughout the entire journey.
It's clear that SG Trader AI is like a potential game changer.
It has that potential, yeah.
Now, I want to zoom out a bit, look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
AI is changing so fast.
It's moving at lightning speed.
Do you think tools like this are the future of how startups get funded?
That's the million-dollar question. AI is already transforming so many things.
And the startup world is right there in the mix.
It's definitely not immune. As AI gets even smarter, it makes sense it'll play a bigger role in funding.
It's exciting, but also kind of mind-blowing to think about. For all those listening, entrepreneurs, investors.
Yeah, what does this mean for them?
What are the implications of this shift to AI-powered fundraising? Is it a win-win, or are there downsides?
Well, it's complicated. There are no easy answers.
Right.
On one hand, tools like this can democratize access to funding.
So startups with great ideas, but like limited resources have a shot.
Exactly. And for investors, AI can make finding and evaluating potential investments easier.
Saving them time and resources.
Exactly.
There's a lot of upside for both sides.
Definitely. But like with any new tech, there are things to watch out for.
What kind of things?
Could there be a bias toward startups that are really good at using AI?
You mean like startups that are good at making their data and message appealing to the algorithms?
Exactly. Almost like SEO, but for fundraising.
Interesting.
And then there's the human element.
Oh, right.
Will using AI make investing less personal?
Less about relationships?
Yeah. Will the art of storytelling, building those connections, take a backseat to data?
It's a valid concern. Trust and rapport are so important in fundraising.
I agree. We don't want it to become just a transaction.
It needs to be a balance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
AI can be super useful for efficiency, insights.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't replace that human element.
Building relationships.
Right. The most successful startups, regardless of the tools, will combine data and storytelling.
Connecting with investors on a human level.
It's that personal touch.
So, as we're talking about SG Trader AI and all this, one question keeps popping into my head.
Okay.
What advice would you give to startups thinking about using AI tools like this, for their fundraising?
That's a great question.
What are some key things they should think about to make sure they're using it effectively and ethically?
I think the first thing is to remember AI is a tool.
Oh.
It's not some magic solution.
Right.
It can definitely help make your pitch better, reach more people.
Yeah.
But it's not going to automatically get you funding.
You still need the basics.
Exactly.
A good idea, a strong team, and knowing your market.
You got
AI can boost what you already have, but it can't create it out of thin air.
It's not magic.
So it's about using AI to make your existing efforts stronger, not replacing everything.
Exactly.
Another thing, right? Make sure you're using AI in a way that feels true to you, to
Absolutely.
your brand and your values.
Don't try to force your startup into some mold just because an algorithm might like it.
Like, don't be fake just for the AI.
Right. Investors can see right through that.
You want to use AI to show your real strengths, your passion,
That's what resonates.
not create this like fake persona.
Authenticity is key.
And I guess use it as a learning experience.
Oh, definitely.
Use AI to get better at your pitch over time.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what investors say.
Both the good and the bad.
Right. And use that feedback to fine tune your message, your whole approach.
AI can give you insights, but you have to make sense of them.
It's a partnership, not just blindly following.
Exactly.
The best startups will find that balance.
Using AI's power, but keeping their own vision. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up.
Yeah.
It's clear from our deep dive that SG Trader AI,
It's really interesting.
it's changing the game for startups trying to raise money.
It is.
It's a powerful set of tools to make a killer pitch and find the right investors.
Powerful.
But
Right.
like with any powerful tool,
Yeah.
you got to use it wisely, ethically,
I'm sure.
and always remember the human side of things.
That's what drives it all.
The human side of innovation and success.
Exactly.
So to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
embrace the possibilities of AI,
Absolutely.
but stay true to those values that matter most.
Couldn't agree more.
The future of startups, it's bright.
It is.
And with the right tools and mindset, you can achieve anything.
I believe that.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating deep dive
It was my pleasure.
into AI and startup
There's
fundraising.
a lot to think about.
We hope you learned something valuable to apply to your own journey.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious.
My name is Konstantin Stefana. I'm the owner of the family office and the company called Company I Limited. I also have a live streaming channel for startups. It's SG Trader. So anybody, we let startups to pitch investment community on our channel. I give them 3-minute pitch. We publish their video on our channel, and everybody who is interested, please welcome to send me your video, and I will publish, I will roll for almost a month your video for all financial community. The channel is live, it's streaming live 5 days a week from morning.
Another thing that startups need to look for is a market that is either started to undergo or is soon going to undergo exponential growth. I think this is actually related to one of the biggest mistakes investors make when evaluating startups. Investors always say, well, what's your growth rate? We care about the growth rate. Investors will forgive smallish revenue today if it's growing quickly. For some reason, people don't think about markets this way. But if you think about the most important startups, they are the ones that I start in small markets that are growing very, very quickly. 11 years ago, the market for iPhone apps was $0. It's now huge. And I think if you only think about the TAM today, you'll make a big mistake. What you really want to do is identify a market that's going to grow every year and be able to ride that up elevator.
It's 12:40 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. The South Korean won is paring losses with officials pledging to stabilize financial markets. The won now 1.7% lower, trading at 14.28 against the dollar. After South Korea's president declared martial law, the finance minister said that they will provide unlimited liquidity to stabilize markets. Lawmakers in South Korea voted unanimously to lift that martial law. We do check markets for you all day long at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is little changed. NASDAQ little changed on the upside, and the Dow is down 0.1%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.2% and the 2-year yield at 4.16%. BlackRock has agreed to buy HPS Investment Partners, an all-stock deal valued at roughly $12 billion, a purchase that will propel the world's largest asset manager into the highest ranks of private credit. BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink.
The planned combination will scale our offering to a top 5 private credit franchise and differentiated investment performance.
Leo Kogwan is one of Tesla's largest individual shareholders. He says he's paring his stake in the automaker, putting some proceeds instead into government debt. He's aiming to hedge his portfolio, fearing a potential stock market crash like back in 1929. Tesla shares now 2.2% lower. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now back to Balance of Power with Joe Matthew.
All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power here in Washington. As the nominees make their way across the Senate, Pete Hegseth sitting down with more senators today who will help to decide his fate, assuming this does, in fact, reach a confirmation hearing. And we have no reason to believe that it will not. But, of course, he has been enshrouded in some controversy following his remarks about women serving in the military following a series of sexual assault allegations, but appears to at least have the support of Republican senators giving him the benefit of the doubt. He met last evening with Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Cynthia Lummis, Rick Scott. They emerged with good things to say. He also met yesterday with Senator Tommy Tuberville. The coach had this to say about their meeting. Let's listen.
He's going to be a great Secretary of Defense. He understands it. As I tell him, we don't need a general officer, admiral, or a person of high command. We need a drill sergeant in the military. We need somebody to straighten the military out, to get the woke, the DEI affiliation out, and go from there.
Spoken as Tommy Tuberville only could say. So let's assemble our political panel and get into this here for a second day this week. Rick Davis is back with us, of course, Republican strategist, partner, Stone Court Capital, and Bloomberg Politics contributor, alongside Kristen Hahn, back with us from Rock Solutions, Democratic strategist. It's great to see you both. Rick, what do you think? Does Tommy Tuberville know what's best for the Pentagon? He says, again, we do not need a general. We don't need an officer, an admiral, or a person of high command. We need a drill sergeant. Is that right?
Well, I know I don't have to remind you, but he was the sole vote hold up hundreds of promotions in the general staff during the period of time, that probably for 9 months. So nobody dislikes him more than the Pentagon. And so a full endorsement of this candidate has very little weight within his own caucus, certainly not within the Pentagon, especially his disdain for the General Officer Corps.
Well, it does seem that he's getting the benefit of the doubt, Kristen, and I think, we could talk about the specific allegations, the controversies, the settlement that he paid, but just broadly speaking, should we be looking for people of experience who have authority over the agency that they're going to be running, who have a background to fall on here, or is it about simply tapping disruptors? I'm not sure what the drill sergeant would mean. I guess he wants to knock the woke out of the Pentagon. But these agencies need managers, don't they?
I think they do. I think that should probably be the baseline. And unfortunately, I think with many of Donald Trump's picks, there doesn't seem to be an adequate baseline for who going into these really important positions. The matter of fact, he just doesn't have the experience that's necessary to go in and run an organization as large as the Department of Defense. And it's unfortunate that, it seems that he will not have the confidence of many over there when he takes this position. I think that a lot of these appointees, a lot of these senators would do well to ask serious questions, not just give a rubber stamp. I know that Matt Gaetz withdrew and made all their lives much easier in that respect. But, some difficult questions need to be had, even though this is clearly Donald Trump's pick and they want to go along with it.
We're going to continue our conversation here with Rick and Kristen. I just want to mention quickly a headline that just crossed the terminal. Emmanuel Macron says he will not resign before his mandate ends in 2027. This is a red headline on the Bloomberg terminal right now as we bump into more geopolitical news today. Rick, your thoughts on the idea of a manager versus a disruptor? I know that Donald Trump partly got elected to put disruptors, if we can use that word, in place of many of these agencies. But something as sprawling as the Pentagon does require a manager, does it not?
Yeah, I think certainly you would want someone who could do both, right? But I think in this case, it's pretty clear Donald Trump's intention with Pete Hegseth is to have a talking head in the Pentagon's secretary's office. His one primary accomplishment in his recent career has been speaking on Fox. We know Donald Trump likes people who can speak on television and articulate his plans, and that's pretty clear where this is coming down. We've gotten just a notification. I don't know if it's been confirmed that Steve Feinberg may be appointed the Deputy Secretary of Defense. Steve Feinberg is an extraordinary individual, CEO of Cerberus Asset Management, a billionaire, and has been involved in the defense industry for decades and served on Donald Trump's President's Intelligence Advisory Board as chairman. So I think that he will be seen as the in-house manager, the person who makes the planes take off on time. And so I think this combination, I think the announcement, if it has been done today, comes at a time when they're trying to rescue Hegseth's appointment by reassuring the defense committees in Congress that they're going to have an able hand on the steering wheel in the Deputy Secretary's office.
That's really interesting, Rick, and you are right. This remains, to my knowledge, a Washington Post report at this point. The scoop, indeed, from John Hudson. Trump offered billionaire investor Steve Feinberg the job of Deputy Secretary of Defense. What do you think of that, Kristen? And this could be duplicated in a lot of agencies that we're talking about here. You put kind of the figurehead disruptor at the top, but it's the real managers beneath them. This has been floated many times for HHS as well, if RFK Jr. is nominated. Does that mean that none of these disruptors really have any power?
I mean, it makes sense that they're doing that, particularly as they're going into these conversations with Republican senators who might have concerns about the leaders at the top. It reminds me, though, of the beginning of the last Trump administration, where there were a lot of concerns that a lot of us had about the folks sitting at the very top, which is important, and relying on other people within the departments to make sure that they don't go totally off the rails. So is it probably a good thing? Is it probably necessary to get Pete Hegseth across the finish line? Probably. Should it make people feel better? Yes, Rick makes a good point, but I also think that you need strong management at the top.
Yeah, interesting, some of the allegations against Pete Hegseth that involve a couple of veterans organizations that he was working with, the CVA among them, where there was a whistleblower report said Hegseth got drunk, quote, to the point of needing to be carried out of multiple work events, that he and others, quote, sexually pursued the organization's female staffers despite being married. And Rick Davis, this has Jonathan Martin at Politico thinking out loud this morning that Pete Hegseth, if he cannot be confirmed, should be followed by Joni Ernst, of course, a veteran and someone who's been deeply concerned and has been very active in trying to limit sexual assaults inside the military. She'd be confirmed in a heartbeat, likely, and would be a pioneer to lead the Pentagon for Donald Trump. Does that sound like a plausible scenario to you, Rick?
Well, I think Joni Ernst would be a spectacular Secretary of Defense in so many different ways. Her leadership on the committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, has been stellar. But the reality is she didn't have the greatest relationship with Donald Trump, especially during the caucuses in Iowa last year. She and her governor, Kim Reynolds, did everything they could to basically try to see Donald Trump not succeed. And I don't know how well that's been patched up to this point in time. So knowing how much Donald Trump relies on loyalty as the first sieve and selection process, I doubt if Joni would make her way through it. If anything, she may be the worst nightmare of Pete Hegseth's ability to get confirmed.
Well, that's true.
And I think that probably is more likely.
Well, it's a question about whether there's going to be another scalp here, Kristen. You know, I had people, we had a similar conversation here yesterday about some of these names, and we spoke more specifically yesterday about RFK Jr. I guess Pete Hegseth is getting his turn now. And I heard from some folks who said, well, stop criticizing Trump. I haven't even really mentioned Donald Trump. We're talking about the people he chose here to go through an incredibly difficult confirmation process. That's the case every 4 years. That part doesn't change. But I wonder, in the wake of Matt Gaetz dropping out here, if there is another scalp, Kristen, or if that's the way this works. He was the sacrifice play here, and the rest of these people will be confirmed.
I don't know if Donald Trump thought that far in advance or that strategically. But, you know, it's kind of like a race to the bottom, and then everybody else squeaks through. I mean, they can't. You know, if you're a Republican and you just won re-election and you're looking at this as a mandate, you have to kind of pick your battles. I think that with the nomination of Kash Patel to lead the FBI, which is just outrageous in a lot of people's minds, you know, maybe the focus, at least a little bit, has already has shifted. So, I mean, we'll see. But I think that, you know, you've got some difficult decisions here, and we haven't heard a lot about RFK in the last couple of weeks. So.
Well, it depends what you're reading. There's a lot out there. Rick, we started this hour talking with Ashley Davis about this idea of subverting, somehow circumventing FBI background checks. I know we've talked about this a bit, but it's turned into a standoff here. You've got Senator Wicker, among others, saying that we could be on the verge of a breakthrough. But is this going to be the new normal? Can Donald Trump make this change where FBI background checks go to the wayside because no one trusts the agency?
Well, I mean, we certainly know Donald Trump doesn't trust the agency. I mean, he's had a very difficult relationship with the FBI ever since he became the nominee for the Republican Party in 2015. So the reality is nothing has changed in his relationship with the FBI. He doesn't give them any credibility whatsoever. And remember, he's a provocateur, right? So there are many instances where I think he put some of these names out to just see how they do. I don't have any doubt Matt Gaetz was exactly that example. You know, gee, if he gets through this process, it shows how much control I have. But if he doesn't get through, he's so crazy, nobody will blame me. And I mean, he is trying to disrupt, and it's hard to disrupt when you're, you know, the president-elect. So I have absolutely no doubt he will go right down the line and try and force nominees through without FBI background checks. And it's really ball in the Senate course. You know, Chuck Schumer talked about the division of power in Washington, and the Senate and House are co-equal branches to the presidency. But they have to act like it. They have to exert that. And in Donald Trump's first term, Mitch McConnell, for whatever reason, was not a block to some of Donald Trump's more outrageous demands. And, you know, the question's going to be, how does the Senate handle it now? Not only these committee chairs, but also John Thune, the new majority leader.
Pretty interesting indeed. Senator Roger Wicker, who will be overseeing Hegseth's confirmation as Armed Services Chair, saying that this is set to be resolved, this standoff, quote, in the next few days, unquote. So maybe we're on the verge of something here. We'll keep tabs on this for you, and we'll have a lot more to talk about with our panel in our second hour. Rick Davis and Kristen Hahn will be with us for hour number 2 as well, as we welcome our global television audience. With a dangerous world in mind, we have a couple of important stories to get to. Martial law declared in South Korea. We'll have the latest from our national security team on that, and an important conversation with the president of Georgia, the former Soviet Republic, deciding to suspend negotiations to join the European Union. That is all ahead here on the fastest show in politics, so stay with us. Of course, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Bloomberg.
Okay, today I'm going to talk about how to succeed with a startup. Obviously, more than can be said here in 20 minutes, but I will do the best I can. The most important thing, the number one lesson we try to teach startups is that the degree to which you're successful approximates the degree to which you build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it. Startups always ask us for the secret to success. They always want to believe it's something other than this, because this is really hard to do. But this is it. If you can build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it, you have done 80% of the work that you need to be a really successful startup. If you think about the most successful companies you know, Google, Facebook, whatever, you probably found out about them because a friend of yours said, you got to try this, it's great. So this is the bar. Something that people love so much they tell their friends about it. One important indicator for a product like that is a product that's simple to explain and easy to understand. If you can't explain in a few words what you do, and if at least some people don't say, oh, that's pretty interesting, that's usually a mistake. It's usually a sign of unclear thinking or a need that is not big enough.
I want a bank that shows me what I spend instantly.
We're Monzo. Give us a go. See?
Well, I want a bank that can help me budget for the things I need, like a new leather jacket for Bingo.
We can do that.
Bingo's my cockapoo.
Hi, Bingo.
It's a real faff to sign up.
It takes less than 10 minutes.
Race you.
You're on. Time's up. How'd you get on?
It's a draw.
Is it? We hear you, Bingo. You make Monzo Monzo.
Hi, I'm Laurie Haynes, CEO and co-founder of Shirar, and I'm really excited to tell you that we are going to be raising funds for Shirar again. After a successful raise in 2023, it's time to scale.
We hope that you enjoy the pitch deck and the financial model. Any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us, and we can't wait for you to be part of Shirar.
I will show you how to get the best funding for your startup idea. Let's get started. Here's the deal. If you have an amazing startup idea and need funds to fuel it, we're here to help. Simply send us a video where you explain your idea. Make it clear, concise, and compelling. Hook us in with your passion and vision. Don't forget to include your contact details so investors can reach out directly. This is your chance to shine and get your idea in front of people who can make it a reality. Imagine turning your startup dream into a thriving business. It all starts with that one simple step. So what are you waiting for? Grab your phone, hit record, and let your idea fly. The future of your startup could be just one video away. Remember, be clear, be passionate, and most importantly, be you. We can't wait to see what you've got. Let's get funded now.
of Georgia suspends negotiations to join the European Union amid a standoff with Vladimir Putin. We'll have a special conversation ahead with the president of Georgia. An analysis from our panel today, Rick Davis and Kristen Hahn. It's all after a look at Wall Street. We start there right now, as always, set the baseline on the markets with Amy Morris. How's it looking?
All right, let's look at France now, Joe. The president, Emmanuel Macron, saying that he does not believe Marine Le Pen will join a left-wing coalition to topple the French government, adding that he wouldn't resign before his mandate ends in 2027. French lawmakers are set to hold a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Michel Barnier tomorrow, where Le Pen is expected to join forces with the left. The euro now 0.3% higher, trading at 105 against the dollar. The South Korean won is paring losses, with officials pledging to stabilize financial markets. The won 1.7% lower, now trading at 14.28 against the dollar after South Korea's president declared martial law. The finance minister said they would provide unlimited liquidity to stabilize markets, and lawmakers in South Korea voted unanimously to lift the martial law. We check the markets all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 little changed. NASDAQ is 0.2% higher. The Dow is also little changed. The Russell 2000 index about 0.5% lower. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.2%. The 2-year yield at 4.15%. Salesforce's big push into artificial intelligence has helped drive shares to a record high. Now comes the reality check. Wall Street wants proof that the heavy spending is paying off. Salesforce is expected to report results after the close. Shares are about 0.5% lower. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now back to Balance of Power with Joe Matthew.
Amy Morris, thank you so much, and thanks for being with us on the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. It's the fastest show in politics as we turn to upheaval, not here in Washington, but in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. Political upheaval following parliamentary elections that have led to a standoff with Vladimir Putin and the decision by this country to suspend negotiations to join the European Union. It's a privilege now to have some time with the president of Georgia, Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua, spending time with Georgia President Salome Zurabishvili here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Let's listen.
The situation is not linked to, first of all, I don't have to resign. I have a mandate which goes until a new president is inaugurated. Their president is going to be inaugurated by the end of the month. It's not an election that is recognized by the population. So I will continue to represent the voice of the people that want their vote back, their future back, their European future back. And I will stay, which doesn't mean that it's not an alternative power, because I don't have any power. I'm staying in the constitutional framework completely, again, despite what the official propaganda is trying to portray. But there has to be someone that is the voice of the nation that wants to keep its European future, and I intend to continue to do that and to be also the contact point for our partners, our European and American partners, for the media, the voice of the people.
President, as you say, the current wave of protests is quite big but decentralized. Could you help in actually forming more institutional, so that information goes into one direction, so that everything's processed in a more cohesive way?
No, because there is no way in which it's not my role as a president, and if I wanted to have that role, I couldn't exert it, to be the organizer of the protest. What I can be is a bridge, a relay, in case the authorities want to open some form of dialogue with the people that are protesting on the streets when that time, and if that time comes. I'm the bridge between the people that are protesting and the outside world, because I can express their demands. And I have the trust of our partners abroad, but I certainly cannot organize, I cannot stop, I cannot accelerate. All that is in the hands of the people, and it's very, that is linked to this decision of the Constitutional Court. when you close one by one all the possibilities, what you are doing, in fact, is increasing the frustration of the people that are on the streets. And everybody knows that the increased frustration can then lead to anything.
Georgia President Zhurabishvili speaking with Bloomberg TV and radio following 4 nights of protests in the capital of Tbilisi, where 200 people have been detained. Opinion polls, we should note, make it very clear that most Georgians want their country to join the European Union. And so we find ourselves again in a standoff between Vladimir Putin and the West and Georgia in the middle here. We're joined by Rosalind Matheson, Bloomberg News Director for Europe, Middle East, and Asia, live from our world headquarters in New York for more now. Rosalind, it's great to see you. Is this the end result for Georgia to join the EU, despite what we're seeing right now? Is it inevitable?
Well, there's a lot of that conversation around, is this reminiscent of the Maidan revolution in Ukraine? Of course, we saw, remember, quite some years ago, the protests that erupted there, the idea of Ukraine wanting to draw closer to the EU and being stymied again politically. So lots of questions, are we seeing that again in Georgia? And there are similar moods that we see, the desire by people in Georgia to draw into the EU, but also differences. The protests that we're seeing in Georgia are quite fragmented. There's no great central organisation, and so it could be easier for those protests to be subdued. You've got to have momentum on your side in this case. And so are we about to see, the witnessing of a Maidan-esque revolution in Georgia? The circumstances are similar, but they're also quite very different. And it is an uphill battle, really, to see the protesters gaining the upper hand here. It's in a way not quite reminiscent of Belarus in the region, but also, protests in Belarus got put down and put down and put down into momentum, really faded. And that's possibly, the scenario that we're going to see in Georgia instead.
I'd like to ask you about what's happening, meantime, in South Korea. This is something that is moving very quickly and broke just a couple of hours ago with a declaration of martial law from South Korea's president. Pretty remarkable to watch all of this happen. Lawmakers managed to get back into the parliament and vote to rescind that martial law, but it's unclear exactly what the next steps will be. What's your take on this?
That's right. It's quite a shocking development for South Korea. This is emergency martial law, not military martial law, but it would give the president quite an extra suite of powers at his disposal, and it comes against that backdrop of political gridlock in South Korea. He doesn't control parliament, he can't get bills through, but equally resorting to emergency martial law does seem to be quite a step, and it's really shocked the South Korean people. It shocked his own party, who didn't seem to know this was coming. And as you said, parliamentarians getting into parliament very quickly to vote to rescind it, because he does need parliament to approve it. The question is, what does he do now? Does he ignore parliament? Does he try and bypass parliament? Does he have the ability to bypass parliament? Does this fade off pretty quickly? Has it weakened him as a president past the point of no return? There's a lot of unknowns here, but in a country that has a long and troubled and tricky past with the military, be it military rule or martial law, many episodes of martial law over the years. And because of that, South Koreans really prize democracy. So it's hard to see how this goes down very well with the South Korean public as a result.
Well, yeah, the optics are something to see. The special forces enter parliament here. The president suggesting this is a coup. Is that how we should be looking at this?
Well, there's lots of big words being thrown around, including by the South Korean president. I mean, coup is a very loaded word. And, you can see that he's been acting the way that he thinks, what he needs to do in the minute. But again, there's a strong tide already in South Korea of disquiet at what he's doing or attempting to do. And certainly all the opposition parties, even his own party, saying this is quite an extreme step to be taking. He keeps invoking North Korean forces, but never being specific about what he means by that. North Korean forces of tides operating inside South Korea. So it's unlikely to see he's going to have a lot of public support for this. And certainly it's interesting to see where the military is going to end up. But it's a very messy situation right now in a very tricky time for South Korea. So we can see that's why the markets are obviously very unnerved by it and the question of confidence in South Korea. Neighbours watching very closely what's going on. But it's a very, very fluid situation right now.
Just quickly, Rosalind, does the Biden administration, we understand the president's being briefed on this while he's in Africa, does the U.S. have much influence in outcomes at this point?
Well, it's unclear what influence the US has directly at this point in time with the Biden administration, but of course, South Korea is a key ally of the US in the region. I mean, the US is a big supplier of military support, as we know, US forces stationed there. So a very strong interest in what's happening and in the level of security continuing. Stability in South Korea is very important for the US.
Rosalind Matheson, great to have you with us, Bloomberg News Director for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We covered almost all of them in this conversation. It's great to have you with us from World Headquarters in New York as we add a voice from our national security team from here in Washington. Considering the dangerous world all in one conversation here, we move from what's happening in Georgia to South Korea and now to Syria, where we've been following developments here in an active rebellion against the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Nick Wadhams is with us now in Washington with the latest on this. Nick, it's great to see you as Russia now launches airstrikes in support of the Assad regime. Assad went to Moscow as soon as Aleppo fell. Where does this stand right now, and can Putin be his savior again?
I think there's a real feeling that Putin is stretched very thin. I mean, his priority is Ukraine, and I think that's in part why you've seen what you've seen in Syria, this uprising sort of out of the blue. I mean, the Assad regime essentially has lost its two main backers, Russia and Hezbollah. And in a situation like that, there's a moment of weakness that is being exploited. So, I mean, what this says to me really broadly is just how much October 7th and the fallout from the attack on Israel and Israel's campaign has just completely reoriented the region and what's to come. And essentially, my feeling is no one really knows. I mean, you can see some Russian airstrikes, but I mean, they need every ounce of materiel, every soldier, every pilot focused on Ukraine, where they are making gains. And that's something that he's going to really want to press.
Are we going to see a world in which the U.S. military and the Russian military are essentially sharing airspace over Syria? We've been here before.
We have been here before during President Trump's first term, and in the Biden term. I mean, the U.S. does have a small number of forces in Syria, and there has actually been. I mean, if there are very few channels between the U.S. and Russia, but the Syria situation is one of them, in part because they do not want to be in direct conflict, though there have been instances where that has happened. Yeah, so right. It's a very tense situation, but that is not a place where the U.S. and Russia really want to come face to face.
You mentioned October 7th. There was a feeling of hope last week when a ceasefire was announced between Israel and Hezbollah, and Joe Biden indicated that it might help to unlock a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza. There are questions about whether we can even call this a ceasefire any longer, as Israel's military strikes what they call terror targets in Lebanon, airstrikes last evening in some other areas of the country. What do we call this now?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think what you're seeing, the U.S. argues that, yes, there have been violations of the ceasefire, but not enough to say that this thing is dead. And what they say is that, yes, violations, but the incidence of the number of attacks has really fallen drastically, both by Hezbollah and by Israel. So they're saying it is holding for the time being. What you have seen then is the administration, I mean, they really are putting a lot of their hopes in this ceasefire holding precisely because what you mentioned, that they want to use this momentum to push for something, for a ceasefire with Hamas. And the issue there is, well, if Hamas doesn't have support from Hezbollah to keep going after Israel, they're going to be under renewed pressure to do something. So they see this as a window of opportunity that really is closing very fast, because who knows what's going to happen when President-elect Trump comes into office.
Well, we got a little bit of a sense, I guess, with that posting on Truth Social yesterday, hell to pay in all caps, presumably talking about Hamas, but he didn't indicate that if hostages were not released by the time of his inaugural, there will be hell to pay in the region. I don't know what the exact wording was, but the greatest strike in the history of whatever hits you harder than, which recalls some of the Trump tweets in the first administration. He's really hoping to have a Reagan situation where hostages are released on the evening of the 19th or on the 20th while he's taking that oath, right?
Well, I would never presume to get inside the head of the president-elect. I think, listen, he wants the hostage. He essentially campaigned on the idea that he would bring peace to the region and to Ukraine without really giving a lot of specifics on how he would do that. He really wants that to happen. There's no question to me that if the hostages get released beforehand, I think you would see him take some credit for that as well, and potentially deservedly so. I mean, this is a huge priority for the Biden administration, but also for President-elect Trump. He wants this to happen very, very fast. So as for the tweet, I mean, yes, I covered the State Department during Trump's first term, and these are things that he did frequently, sometimes to great effect. I mean, a lot of the North Korea discussion and negotiation happened basically over Twitter, sometimes contrary to the desires and plans of his own Secretary of State. And then frequently you would see that threat and then it would dissipate and nothing would happen. So hell to pay could mean 1,000 different things, especially given that he's not even in office yet.
Well, that's true enough. And Marco Rubio is not our Secretary of State yet. It does seem that he'll have a pretty easy confirmation. I don't know if that's what you're hearing, but will that be followed up by a world tour, essentially? What are his first couple of visits look like?
That's a great question, because I think that will probably be, of the nominees, one of the very, very easiest. I mean, obviously, Senate decorum, his colleagues in the Senate will breeze him through, but he won't have any trouble there, I suspect. But the question for me is, well, who's going to really have control over U.S. foreign policy in Trump 2? I mean, he's already appointing all of these ambassadors and envoys without Marco Rubio being confirmed. So we have a potential envoy for the Middle East. We have one for Ukraine. We have an Israel ambassador. I mean, these are all people who will report straight to Trump. And it fits with a broader trend we have seen, which is the State Department playing a smaller and smaller role in the formulation of foreign policy, and that power really being stuck at the White House. And in particularly given President-elect Trump's attitudes and the way he executes on foreign policy, I think you can expect to see that continue.
Yeah, that's for sure. The visits to Mar-a-Lago have been interesting, notably Justin Trudeau last week. Do we see more of that as we get closer to the handover?
I think you're going to see a lot of visits to Mar-a-Lago, and that's a great example. I mean, the world leaders know the president issues a threat. One thing you can do is go to Mar-a-Lago, play nice, get some FaceTime. And, sometimes that's all it takes. Already there are some indications that conversations between Trump and Trudeau and Sheinbaum in Mexico have diffused a lot of the anxiety and tension we heard around his threats of 25% tariffs against Mexico and Canada. Trump is more experienced coming in for round 2, but world leaders are also much more experienced in how to deal with him. And those visits are a tool in the toolbox.
We didn't even get to Ukraine. So much to talk about with Nick Wadhams, A Dangerous World. As I mentioned, that's why he leads our national security team here in Washington. Nick, thank you so much for the great coverage. You can find a lot more on all of these stories, of course, on the terminal and online. We'll assemble our panel next. Rick Davis and Kristen Hahn on the way on Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's 1:21 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. The South Korean won is paring its losses now. Officials pledging to stabilize financial markets. The won is 1.7% lower, trading at 14.28 against the dollar. After South Korea's president declared martial law, the finance minister said they would provide unlimited liquidity to stabilize markets. Lawmakers in South Korea voted unanimously to lift martial law. France's President Emmanuel Macron says he does not believe Marine Le Pen will join a left-wing coalition to topple the French government, adding that he won't resign before his mandate ends in 2027. French lawmakers will hold a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Michel Barnier tomorrow, where Le Pen is expected to join forces with the left. The euro right now 0.3% higher, trading at 105 against the dollar. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is down 0.1%. We do check markets for you all day long at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is little changed on the upside. NASDAQ is up 0.2%. The Dow is down 0.1%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.19% and the 2-year yield at 4.14%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, you can subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's go back to Balance of Power with Joe Matthew.
Amy Morris, thank you so much. Watching Wall Street for us here on the fastest show in politics. Thank you for being with us on the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power. We're live from Washington on Bloomberg TV and radio with the big question, how far will they kick the can? Of course, I'm referring to Congress. Lawmakers are back last night into today. Senate's getting back into session. The House will a little bit later on with 17 days until we run out of money. Now, noteworthy, nobody's running countdown clocks, at least not yet. No one's really talking about a shutdown. But the fact is, we might have to kick the can so we can kick the can. We'll explain with our political panel. Rick Davis joins us now, partner at Stone Court Capital, Bloomberg Politics contributor and Republican strategist, alongside Kristen Hahn, Democratic strategist partner at Rock Solutions. Great to see you both here. Kristen, you spent enough time in the House of Representatives to have seen this movie more than once. They don't even have an agreement on top lines right now, and the government runs out of money on December 20. So you can probably tell us how this is going to work, right? We'll have a short-term resolution, kicks the can into the start of the new year. Everybody come back in January when they have a lot of other things to do to try to figure out how to get us into the new year so Donald Trump can affect the budget. What's it going to look like?
I mean, I think you pretty much laid it out pretty well. I mean, they're looking at, like you said, we run out of money. The government runs out of money on December 20th. Congress has a history of running up against deadlines. I don't think that would be much different here. You're looking at potentially funding the government through maybe March of 2025, although they'll have to come to an agreement there. And of course, you have the Republicans who are looking forward to taking over control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they have a lot of plans that they're looking at, but there's a lot on the docket between now and then. It's just depends on whether they can get it all done with so few legislative days left on the calendar.
Rick Davis is about to scream regular order. Rick, we have to remind everybody, we've been punting for a while here. They punted in September, which got us to this point. They're going to punt again so they can do it again in the new year, right?
Yeah, I think regular order is punting now. So you won't hear me scream that anymore, at least not between now and March. Look, the reality is the biggest issue is that top line number. They can fill in whatever budget they want as long as they have an agreement on how much total spending will occur. And, I have to remind you, in addition to the spending, we have to tuck into that, a supplemental for disaster relief. Right. And after the winter weather has already pounded the Great Lakes, I suspect there'll be more money needed for that. So that's becoming a more and more urgent spending issue. And then, of course, what everyone says, the National Defense Authorization Act will be fine. We always pass it. Well, it hasn't passed yet. And it's just another thing that's going to come up the works in this process. So, I'm glad they're back in town. I'm glad they're working. It's not great for traffic, but it's good for the country. So hopefully they don't get too grinded down to a stop here soon.
We've got 2 weeks to get this done here. I guess 2.5, really, when you look at it. Kristen, this won't be decided until the last minute, right? Or are we going to be in a world where lawmakers are held over, might have to work a little closer to Christmas than planned? How do we end the year?
I mean, there's always the chance that can happen, but in my experience, particularly the Christmas holiday has been a great motivator for members of both the House and the Senate. I would project they would come to an agreement. But, as was said, like you've got NDAA to deal with, potentially a farm bill, all these things that, that still have to happen or should happen. I would love, like Rick, if the government could get back to regular order. That's not, this seems to be the case anytime soon. And I would not expect it to be the case with such a slim majority in the House, even next year when the Republicans take over.
Yeah, could be a majority of one. If Donald Trump gets all of his nominees through. There are a couple coming out of the House, which makes life a little more difficult for Speaker Mike Johnson. Of course, those nominees are making the rounds right now, not necessarily from the House, but in the case of today, we've got Scott Bessent, Donald Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary, walking the halls of the Senate, meeting with the senators who will help to determine his fate when he gets into the confirmation process and the actual hearings. The other making the rounds still is Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's pick for Defense Secretary, who has been enshrouded by controversy here. Not only some sexual assault allegations, but also his comments on women serving in the military, serving in combat roles, something he was asked about yesterday as he made his way through the halls of power in the Senate. Let's listen.
How do you feel about the women in combat?
We have amazing women who serve in our military. Amazing women.
Do you think they should be in combat?
I think they're already in combat.
If you couldn't hear that, if you're with us on the radio, so you agree that women should be in combat? He said, I think they already are in combat. Rick, does that sound like somebody who might be backing off some of the harder lines he's taken in interviews and commentaries before he actually found himself in the United States Senate?
I'd say not just backing off, but full retreat. Yes, declaring the obvious. Women are in combat. The thing he said he didn't want to have. So, look, I mean, I think that he's starting to figure out that the comments he made before being nominated don't stand the test that he needs to stand. So he's starting to clean some of that up. I would think he would find something more inventive and positive to say about women in combat, but the fact that he recognizes that they are serving in combat now is a huge step forward. And remember, the people he's meeting with right now are the members of the Armed Services Committee, the same people who are anxious to see the National Defense Authorization Act pass. And he's got to get through that committee before he gets to the full floor. And so they're the real test. And margins will be slim, just probably one more Republican than the Democrats have. And so you want to have that vote coming out of committee positive, at least with all the Republicans on board. And of course, the biggest one on that committee that seems to have real interest in working him through the paces is going to be Joni Ernst, senator from Iowa, and another woman who has served in combat.
That's right. Kristen, when you read the tip sheets, the commentaries and op-eds, there is this feeling that Hegseth could be the other one who doesn't make it, much like Matt Gaetz. Then again, we're hearing from a lot of Republican senators who say they want to give him the benefit of the doubt. That answer he just gave on women in combat, as a Democrat, does that make you feel better about this selection?
I don't think I feel good about a lot of things, from his mom's email to what he said about women in combat. He was very clear before. He said women have no place in combat. And there's only so much, clearly he's had to back off and retreat from that position, as Rick said. But he was very adamant about that, and it wasn't very respectful to women in uniform who served this country well. And in addition to that, it seemed like he was more making a problem where a problem did not already exist. So I'm glad that he's changed his tune on that. It's clear that was important for him to do leading into these discussions with the Republican senators in particular. But does it make me feel better? Not necessarily.
Interesting, Kristen, to see Democrats conduct their leadership elections in the Senate today. No big surprises. A guy named Chuck Schumer will be the Democratic leader in the Senate. Also, Dick Durbin, Whip, Amy Klobuchar stepping into the number 3 spot, which also forced the creation of a job for Cory Booker, a newly created position of Strategic Communications Chair. Does this team represent the new blood the Democrats need?
I think that they've done a fairly good job. Cory Booker has been a leader and one of the younger members of the Democratic caucus in the Senate. I think, if you look towards the House as well, you've got some interesting potential changes in committee chairmanship or ranking members, which is the top Democratic spot on each committee. The Republicans, I've long said, have a standing rule that you can only be a committee chairman or hold that top spot for so long. The Democrats have not had that in place, which has led to kind of stagnation on the committees, with younger members not being able to move up as easy in the ranks. And I think that you're seeing some potential movement on some critical committees, like judiciary, potentially agriculture.
Rick, you were a creature of the Senate for many years here, and you saw Mitch McConnell hang on through good times and bad. Are you surprised to see all of these same names, essentially, the old guard continuing on the Democratic side of the aisle?
Yeah, different from the House of Representatives. Seniority still matters. People who want to serve in leadership are kind of self-selected. It's not for everybody in the Senate. And so I'm not surprised to see the sort of typical group. Amy Klobuchar, very, very well thought of Democrat, ran for president. And I'm glad to see Cory Booker taking a new role, because he's, I think, been an underutilized Democratic asset. And Republicans have already gone through their leadership selections and fights, and we've got our team in place. And I would say, really strong leaders on both sides should be able to get something done in the Senate. Remember, last 2 years, the Senate has been surprisingly bipartisan by anybody's estimation, and we'd hope that some of that can continue into this first 2 years of the Trump administration.
That is very true. Kristen, we started talking this conversation about government funding and a potential shutdown. No one sees that happening the end of this year or the beginning of next. A lot of people do see it happening in March, though, when that next continuing resolution concludes, right around the time we're talking about renewing the Trump tax cuts and some of the other issues dealing with the fiscal cliff. Do you see a shutdown in the new year?
I mean, I think that I won't speak for the Republicans, but I think they would be loath for that to happen, as one of the first things they do as having control of both the House, Senate, and the White House to shut down the government. I think that there will be people in their ranks who will want to use that as a kind of a political football in order to get some of the government cuts and other priorities through. So I think that the Republicans, with such a narrow majority, particularly in the House, will eventually probably have to once again come to Democratic leadership and look for some of the votes on the Democratic side to get any government funding passed.
She is Kristen Hahn, Rock Solutions partner, Democratic strategist. He, of course, is Rick Davis, Bloomberg Politics contributor, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Thank you both for a great conversation. We'll have a lot more ahead here on Balance of Power, including our conversation with the governor of Alaska. Think energy and drill, baby, drill. Some of the promises that Donald Trump made, specifically when it comes to drilling in Alaska and ANWR. We'll have much more next with an expert here on Bloomberg.
It's 1:40 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. A rally that drove stocks to a series of all-time highs, now showing some signs of exhaustion. Investors looking for clues about whether the Fed will cut interest rates again this month. We do bring you markets all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 little changed on the downside. NASDAQ holding steady at 0.1% higher, and the Dow is 0.1% lower. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.19% and the 2-year yield at 4.15%. Intel's search for a new chief executive officer will focus heavily on outsiders. Sources tell Bloomberg Intel is considering candidates like Marvell Technology head Matt Murphy and former Candace Design Systems CEO Lip-Bu Tan. Intel's board ousted former CEO Pat Gelsinger December 1st. Intel shares right now about 6% lower. The South Korean won is paring off its losses, officials pledging to stabilize financial markets. It's 1.7% lower, trading at 14.28 against the dollar, after South Korea's president declared martial law, and the finance minister said they would provide unlimited liquidity to stabilize markets. Job openings in the U.S. picked up in October, suggesting demand for workers is stabilizing after steep declines in recent months. The Bureau of Labor Statistics JOLTS survey shows available positions increased to 7.74 million. That's from a revised 7.37 million reading in September. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. We return to Balance of Power with Joe Matthew.
All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. Watching Wall Street for us as we turn our attention to the topic of energy. And of course, this is the fastest show in politics, so we're going to do this through policy here in Washington by way of Alaska. And I mentioned this just 24 hours after we saw the price of a gallon of gas fall below $3 nationally, that according to Gas Buddy. It was at $2.99 when we drove home last night. It's back above $3 today. But there's been some progress here, and certainly when you look at what's happening in the crude oil market, remembering we had a high WTI West Texas Intermediate of about $87 a barrel. That was back the beginning of April. Today we're about $20 below that level right now, $69 at the moment actually, but still holding below 70. And that's the baseline for what we're going to see in the new administration. Donald Trump has, of course, promised to cut energy prices by half as the centerpiece of his policy to combat inflation across the board. And the refrain that we heard in Milwaukee, much like it was in the Twin Cities in 2008, was drill, baby, drill. Now, on the other end of these promises, at least in some cases, is the governor of Alaska. And I'm glad to say that he's in Washington today. He came here to warm up in our 25-degree weather. Governor Mike Dunleavy, it's great to see you in the nation's capital. Welcome back.
Great to be here on a summer day.
TV and radio. On a summer day with, I think it was 27. I'll be fair here. I want to know what your state is going to look like a year or 4 from now, knowing that Donald Trump has talked a lot about not only unwinding regulations, but unwinding limits on drilling in your state, specifically in ANWR. How quickly will you get to this, and what changes in the offing?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. So it depends on the executive orders. Some have said that the president's going to drop executive orders immediately, maybe even on the first day. Hopefully some of those executive orders will repeal what some of the Biden administration folks have done to Alaska. Our Senator Dan Sullivan has an interesting chart that shows about 66 sanctions against Alaska, is what we call them, since the Biden administration came into play. So, for example, in 2017, ANWR was open under the tax and jobs bill. And the Biden administration has really done everything they can to stop those leases from actually going into play. We're supposed to have a sale again, a second sale for leases in ANWR in December. We're not sure if that's even going to happen. This is required by law. But we'll see when December comes along. But we're questioning whether this administration is going to go through with that. But I would say what Alaska is going to look like is what it's supposed to look like. What this country is supposed to look like is tremendous opportunity under the Trump administration, just like his first term. Great conversations with the president. During his first term, he always asked us, what does Alaska need? What can we do for Alaska? And under President Trump, we got ANWR. We were drilling more. We were moving west in the NPRA, which is the National Petroleum Reserve, about 27 million acres of land in Alaska that was designated solely for oil production and gas production. Very supportive he is of our gas line project that is fully permitted that we're trying to finalize. Timber industry. Timber industry disappeared in the Tongass National Forest under the Clinton administration. Hopefully that comes back. But between oil, gas, mining, timber, We have tremendous opportunity in Alaska. All we want is the opportunity to be able to develop those resources on federal land. And we're very hopeful with President Trump coming back.
You mentioned the leases under the Biden administration. 7 of them that had been acquired by the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority were canceled, and 2 others were abandoned as a result. You're in an interesting position here as a policymaker with one hand on Washington, the other on industry. There's been a bit of a Lucy with the football, according to some oil producers, who want assurances before they start investing in these leases. What would you tell them?
Well, that's another thing that the Trump administration will bring is certainty. So part of the problem with the leases in ANWR, as you mentioned, is when you're selling leases, but on the other hand, you're telling folks to not invest in the Arctic, to not put money in the Arctic, to not put money into oil. It provides an uncertain future for those investors. And so I think under the Trump administration, that's going to change. The other thing that's very important to realize is we're going to need 2 to 3 times as much energy as we're producing right now because of data farms, supercomputers. That's rapidly changing. A gigawatt of electricity powers about 800,000 homes. We only have 700,000 people in the state of Alaska. So some of these data farms are using more than the power we generate for all of our residents. You're going to have as much energy as possible coming from various sources, and we're going to need it sooner than later.
You're sitting on oil, but a lot of people are talking about nuclear now. Do you support that?
Yeah, we support all forms of energy. Doesn't matter if it's renewables, oil, gas, nukes, any and all forms of energy. And we actually passed a nuke siting bill 2 years ago that's going to make it easier for nuclear outfits to come up and take a look at Alaska.
Is that right? So Alaska could be the home of the next new nuclear reactor in the United States?
Well, I hope so. And we're also looking at a nuclear reactor on one of our military bases at Eielson. So, yes, we hope so. You need as much energy as possible, again, from any source we can get it from.
Or will we see an auction in the early stages of the Trump administration when it comes to these leases?
I hope
or
so.
do you not have a sense exactly what that procedure will be?
I hope so. And I hope that also pertains to offshore oil leases, which were also negatively impacted by the Biden administration. So onshore, offshore, again, we hope that there's a couple lease sales that go up pretty quick.
The prize for you, unless you tell me otherwise, is a pipeline, a natural gas pipeline that the Trump administration has promised. You actually retweeted a statement by Donald Trump on this. What's your expectation? What has he told you?
Well, we have all the permits for this pipeline. It's a massive pipeline project where I think we're battling our last court case. So this pipeline project is really coming together with buyers and sellers of gas. The president's been very consistent. President Trump's been very consistent. And he supports this gas line concept. What people don't realize is Alaska pioneered LNG export for North America in the late 1960s, 68, 69. We sent gas to Japan, LNG, out of Nikiski, Alaska, which is south of Anchorage. Yeah. That occurred for 50 years until our gas got depleted in the Cook Inlet. But we're talking about North Slope gas, which is 100 trillion cubic feet to 200 trillion cubic feet of gas, tremendous amounts of gas. But we're very close to consummating this gas pipeline, and pretty excited about it.
Will Chris Wright and Doug Burgum help you make that happen?
Well, I know Doug. Doug's a former governor.
Sure is.
Comes from a energy state. Yeah. I think I don't know Mr. Wright well, but from what I understand, he's going to do a great job as well. But Doug is going to be terrific because it's that interface between technology, supercomputing, and energy. And his role as the energy czar, I think, is going to pay amazing dividends for this country.
Energy czar, but also the Interior Secretary might have something to say about the lands we're talking about.
Yeah, we have more BLM lands, more park lands than any other state in the country in terms of acreage. Our population has more Native Americans than any other state as a percentage. 20% of our population is Native American, and so a lot to do with the Department of Interior Alaska has. And so we look forward to working with Doug on solving some problems for the state and the country.
The biggest tribe in Alaska supports your move on energy.
Most Native Alaskans, most Alaskans support our moves on energy.
This is something that's been mischaracterized in the media. How come?
Because it doesn't play to the narrative on the left. My wife is Inupiaq Eskimo. My kids are Eskimo. They're tribal members and they're members of our native corporations up there. My 3 girls work at the largest lead zinc mine in the world. It's a resource extraction industry. Most Native Americans, they're Americans. They want to be able to turn their lights on. They want to be able to warm their homes. They want to be able to drive their machines, their cars, their snow machines, whatever it is. And so, yeah, energy is important to all of us.
They also want to drink clean water and breathe clean air. Do you worry about the impact on climate change that, for instance, the LNG exports? Because lifting that moratorium looks like a day one endeavor for Donald Trump.
Boy, I hope so. And I don't, because Alaska takes care of its environment probably better than any other place in the country, any other place in the world, and probably any other place in the country. When you shift your resource development overseas to places like China, places in Africa, the Middle East, they don't have the environmental regulations that we do. And so by doing it here in America, you get the benefits of taking care of the environment, jobs, wealth creation, and really opportunity. And this energy is really going to be the underpinnings for the supercomputing age, the AI age that we need to be leaders in.
You've got your eyes on data center, don't you?
Absolutely.
That's a big deal for Alaska? Or does the distance make it difficult to put the data centers themselves in Alaska? Or is it about procuring energy in Alaska that will feed the data centers here?
Well, what we have going for us in Alaska is energy.
Yeah.
We have continuous acres of land. You need large tracts of land.
Sure.
We have that. We have 3 times the fresh water of any other state.
So set up the farms in Alaska.
And we have cool temperatures. Yes.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Cooling is a big part of this.
Huge.
That's fascinating.
Huge.
I want to talk about you, Governor, in your personal trajectory, because a lot of people are watching us right now. Joe's talking to the governor of Alaska. He's this big timberman-looking guy that's logging. You're from Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
And after you graduated from college, after spending a life hunting and fishing and being outdoors, you decided to just move your life to Alaska. Through a connection, you got a job as a logger.
Yes.
As a kid from Scranton, which more people associate with Joe Biden than with Mike Dunleavy. What was the scratch or the itch you were trying to scratch by making that move?
Always loved the outdoors and the ultimate outdoor.
Was it culture shock when you got there?
Not really. Great people in Alaska, just like great people in Scranton. So not really, but it was the outdoors, the wilderness that drew me there back in 1983. So right out of college, went to Alaska and never looked back.
Never looked back?
Never looked back.
How much time did you spend logging?
Well, that was for several months.
What did you learn doing that?
Several months in Southeast Alaska. Then I moved up north, close to the Arctic Circle, and I was a teacher for over 22 years.
You were a teacher for a long time before you got into politics.
Yes.
What did you learn as a logger from Scranton, Pennsylvania?
That jobs are incredibly important, especially for low-income folks. Opportunity is very important. And resource development is what Alaska is all about. That's why the U.S. acquired Alaska from Russia, was resource development. And again, we do it better than anywhere else, I think, in the world.
You then became a teacher.
Yes.
Do you think that Donald Trump is on the right track to eliminate the Department of Education as an educator yourself?
I do, because education was one of those rights that the states never gave up in the Constitution when we formed the federal government, because the states believed that their control over education was critically important, not the federal government's control. And so the Department of Education is a new department, came in under Jimmy Carter. And a number of us that were teachers, administrators, school board members, which I was as well, we think you can do things better at the local level than you can thousands of miles away from Alaska or thousands of miles away from other states. And so certainly support the elimination, if possible, of the Department of Education.
What do you do for funding for disabled students, some of the other expenses that might be hard for a state to carry?
You run that money through Health and Social Services. Yeah. There's many ways to get money to certain groups in the educational umbrella. It doesn't have to be through this department that currently exists.
A lot of people suggested you for a number of jobs here in Washington.
I heard that.
Yeah, you might have as well. You're here right now. I don't know who you're talking to. Would you consider working for this administration? Maybe you should run the Department of Education.
Well, I think he's already got a great pick in Linda McMahon for education. But the president and I never talked about a job. He knows that I have 2 years left in my term. I thoroughly enjoy this job, and as mentioned earlier, we're on the verge of some big projects that we want to make sure get across the finish line. So I've got my hands filled over the next 2 years with Alaska, and I look forward to it.
A lot of governors, though, say that the stock answer is, oh my God, Washington, nothing gets done there. I'm better off here. I'm an executive running my own state right where I want to be.
There's truth to that, too.
Is there truth to that? Does anything get done in Washington with Donald Trump at the other end of Pennsylvania?
I think with President Trump, he really wants to change things. He really wants to disrupt things. And I say that in the positive. He really wants to give power back to the states, give power back to the people. So I'm excited about the possibilities. I saw what he did his first term, and he's had 4 years to plan for this term. I think it's going to be a great 4 years for this country.
Can he really drop energy prices by 50%?
If we produce more.
Yeah.
If we produce more.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes. And for Alaska, What we want to have is more production, not necessarily higher prices, because higher prices hurt Americans, hurt Alaskans, but more production. That's where we'll get revenue from as well, more production.
Nice to see you in town.
Yeah,
Come see us again. The governor of Alaska, Mike Dunleavy. Now you know where he's from. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thank you for spending time with us here on the fastest show in politics. We've got a lot more lined up for you in the late edition of Balance of Power. So meet us back here at 5 p.m. Washington time on Bloomberg TV and radio. In the meantime, Bloomberg Business Week live from New York. We'll have much more later on the transition and the latest as well from South Korea, where martial law is currently in place. Thanks for spending time with us today. Again, I'm Joe Matthew, and I'll meet you back here at 5 here on Bloomberg TV and radio.
My general advice is continue to seek out companies or people that are maybe one stage or two stage ahead of you. And I think this is generalizable to not just to startups, but anyone seeking fast growth in their own professional lives, in their careers too. What does greatness look like? Try to seek out people who've been there, done that before, and then try to not connect with one, but try to interview 3, 5, 10 people to see what is a general pattern of greatness that look like that will get you to the next level of the company, next stage, maybe a year, 12 months from now, 24 months from now. Seek out people who kind of went down the path a few times. Then you'll start to find this pattern that start to emerge. What are things that you need to have 12 months from now, 24 months from now that you currently don't have? Then try to build a path towards that. It's almost like Amazon's or Jeff Bezos' mantra of working backwards. Think about what your end game or next stage look like, and then figure out your steps to getting there, and who do you need to work with, upgrading or coaching your existing team or recruiting from somewhere else to really level your leadership. Because ultimately, the job of a CEO is to do 3 things, right? One is get the strategy right for your company, making sure it's executed, get the right teams onboarded, getting the resources, whether it be fundraising or allocating your resources. So it's strategy, people, or team, figuring out how you need to navigate those things to get to the next level.
When I was younger, I used to be in bands. I'd play drums in bands and toured America with them, did a lot of session drumming, recorded albums. So yeah, it was good fun doing the drumming. The only reason I stopped it, well, I still play, but not as serious as I did when I was younger, but drumming doesn't pay the bills. I was never good enough to be able to pay the bills with it, but it was good fun. I started RJF, and the reason I started it was I saw a gap in the market for particular early stage and startup businesses. With the experience that I've got of running businesses, of being a finance director at the very biggest companies in the world to being finance director of small startups, we were looking at providing more than just basic accountancy services. So yes, we'll do all that. We'll do all the basic, all the statutory side of things that you need to do. But there's so much more value that we can add, and I wanted to have my experience to help these startups, because a lot of them don't really know where to go. can go to your high street accountants and they can do a good job compliance-wise, but you would question whether they've actually been in the fire line of a business. Have you been in a business where you're thinking, how do I pay wages next week? Or business is really successful, what do we do with it next? Or how do we grow it? How do we grow into international territories? Or how do we grow our markets? How do we expand? So a lot of the experience I've seen over the years and seen different types of business in different sectors, I thought, well, it's a real value that I can add to these businesses as opposed to just being an FD, because a lot of these businesses can't afford an FD. But if we can take care of their statutory side of things, the compliance side of things, I'm on hand to be able to help and advise businesses with their growth strategy, or if they're in difficulty, help them through these times.
For another deep dive. This time, we're going to be talking about SG Trader AI.
Okay.
It's this new mobile app that's been kind of making waves in the startup world.
Interesting.
You know, kind of imagine if you're a startup founder, right? You have an amazing idea.
Right.
But actually getting investors to buy in, it feels like you're climbing Mount Everest.
Oh, yeah.
So SG Trader AI, this app, it might just be like your Sherpa.
Okay. Yeah.
We're going to be talking about how this thing helps startups make these awesome video pitches. The kind that really get the investors saying, yes, I'm in.
I see.
And we'll also look into like what really makes it different from everything else out there.
Right.
So what's really cool about this SG Trader AI, I think, is that it's not just about making a video.
Yeah.
It's about giving you this like edge in the whole fundraising game.
I see.
It uses AI to like really look at your startup and make sure your pitch is spot on. Now, I have to admit, when I first heard about this retrieval augmented generation framework, or RA, I was kind of intimidated. To be honest, it sounds a little complicated.
Oh, yeah. It can sound that way.
Can you maybe like break that down for us? What is that in simple terms?
Okay, sure.
And why is it such a big deal for creating a killer pitch?
So imagine you're like a chef, right?
Okay, I like where this is going.
And you've got this amazing recipe book.
Yeah.
That's like your AI model, like ChatGPT or Perplexity, one of those.
Gotcha.
Your ingredients. That's your startups data, the latest trends, all that.
I see.
In Harji, it brings together that recipe and those ingredients to make this like totally unique dish.
Interesting.
And that dish, it's your pitch script.
So it's not giving like generic advice.
Yeah.
It actually understands your startup and what investors want.
Exactly. It knows what's going to click with them.
That's amazing. So it's like having your own pitch coach who knows exactly what each investor's looking for.
Right. You got it.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
What's that?
We looked into some of the other video platforms out there.
Okay, yeah.
Competitors like Temi, Beautiful.ai,
right.
Vidyard.
Right.
And, you know, none of them have this AI-powered script writing.
No, they don't.
It's like they're missing that secret ingredient.
It makes a huge difference.
From your experience, how big of an advantage is that for startups, especially new ones just starting out?
Well, for those early stage startups, it's a complete game changer.
Yeah.
Because they usually have limited budgets, resources.
Tough, yeah.
And putting together a really strong pitch, it's a big challenge.
It's huge.
It's like trying to convince someone to invest in your dream without having that perfect way to say it.
It's like, here's my dream, just trust me.
Exactly. This AI tool removes that whole hurdle.
Right.
So entrepreneurs can just focus on what matters.
Building their product, growing their business.
Exactly.
I totally agree. And, you know, speaking of making things easier, I love that this is a mobile app.
Oh, yeah. It's super convenient.
Like, you just need your phone. That's it. Yep. To make these pro videos. No fancy cameras, no studio rentals. You could be, like, at a coffee shop.
And still make it look awesome.
And make it look like a Hollywood production.
It's amazing, right?
That accessibility is key, especially for startups that are bootstrapping it.
It really levels the playing field.
Yeah.
So everybody has a chance to present a polished, professional pitch.
That's no matter what their budget is.
Right. You don't need a whole film crew to look credible anymore.
And it's not just making the pitch, is it?
No, there's more.
SG Trader AI, it takes it a step further. It helps you get it in front of the right people.
Exactly.
They have their own live stream channel with a massive audience.
I know, it's crazy.
Over 25,000 subscribers and 100,000 daily views.
That's huge exposure.
That's insane. Plus, you can instantly share your pitch with their network of, like, angel investors, VCs.
Yeah, it's great.
To me, that sounds like a shortcut to all that networking,
Yeah.
trying to get in front of investors.
It can be a real grind.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's definitely more efficient.
Yeah.
In the past, startups had to do all these networking events, cold emails, all that hustle.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
I know, right?
So does SG Trader AI really streamline that?
It does. It gives you that direct line to investors who are actively looking.
They're already interested.
Exactly. It's like having a fast pass to the front of the line.
Love that analogy.
Mm,
So it takes out the guesswork and the legwork.
a lot of it, yeah.
From what I see, SG Trader AI doesn't stop there.
Nope. They keep going.
They put everything you need. Script writing, recording, editing, even reaching out to investors.
All in one app.
All in one app.
It's pretty amazing.
It's amazing.
It solves a big problem.
It does.
Think about it. Before this, you had to use all these different platforms and services.
To do each individual thing.
Yeah, just to get your pitch ready and seen by the right people.
A recipe for a total headache.
Especially when you're already juggling a million things as a founder.
They really streamlined all of that into one easy app. That's got to be so valuable.
I know, absolutely. Having everything in one place
Yes.
saves time, reduces stress,
Yeah.
lets you focus on the important stuff, your startup.
Your passion.
Right. It's like a Swiss Army knife for fundraising, but instead of blades, it's all these digital tools.
I love it. The Swiss Army knife of fundraising.
Exactly. And it's all geared towards helping you succeed.
Now, while we were looking into all this, we noticed some competitors have like similar features,
Oh, yeah.
like basic editing or investor databases, that kind of thing.
Right.
But none of them seem to offer this whole package, this all-in-one solution like SG Trader AI.
They don't.
It's like they went above and beyond to really make something just for startups.
They did. It's a really smart move.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, by focusing on startups specifically, they've made a product that really gets their unique challenges.
So it's not a generic video thing trying to be everything to everyone.
Exactly. It's a specialized tool made with that startup journey in mind.
You mentioned earlier that SG Trader AI can actually tailor the pitch script
Yeah,
to different kinds of investors.
that's right.
That really caught my attention. Can you give us like a real world example of how that works?
Sure. So imagine a startup, they're focused on sustainable agriculture.
Okay.
If they're pitching to an impact investor, someone who cares about, social responsibility,
Right. Making a difference.
SG Trader AI can really play up those angles.
I see.
Like how their tech saves water or helps local farmers.
So it's like the app speaks impact investor fluently.
It's a great way to put it. It knows what matters to them.
So no more one size fits all pitches. You're customizing it to what each investor values.
It's about resonating with their interests.
That's amazing.
Now, let's say you're pitching to a VC who's big on AI.
Okay, yeah.
SG Trader AI, it can look at their portfolio, what they've invested in before,
Uh-huh.
and tailor the pitch to highlight your startup's AI side.
It's speaking the investor's language.
Exactly. It's about showing why your startup is perfect for their strategy.
It's like SG Trader AI takes out all the guesswork in figuring out what they want to hear.
It makes it so much easier to target your pitch.
Almost like a secret weapon in the fundraising game. As we've been talking, I can't help but think
What's that?
this would have been so useful when I was starting out.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that way.
Fundraising is tough. Anything to give you an edge is huge.
It is. And SG Trader AI is a great example of how tech can help.
Empower entrepreneurs.
Exactly. To navigate all the complexities of fundraising with more, confidence.
Yeah, and a solid strategy.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot. Let's recap what makes SG Trader AI stand out.
Okay, yeah.
AI-powered script writing tailored to investors.
Right.
Making videos right on your phone.
Super accessible.
Direct access to a network of investors who are ready to go.
That's key.
And an all-in-one platform to streamline everything.
It's all there.
It's like they combined a Hollywood studio, a matchmaking service, and a project management tool.
All for startups. It's a powerful combination.
It is. What makes it so strong is how all those pieces work together, right?
Exactly. It's not just the individual features, it's how they create a whole solution.
Addressing those pain points startups face every step of the way.
Throughout the entire journey.
It's clear that SG Trader AI is like a potential game changer.
It has that potential, yeah.
Now, I want to zoom out a bit, look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
AI is changing so fast.
It's moving at lightning speed.
Do you think tools like this are the future of how startups get funded?
That's the million-dollar question. AI is already transforming so many things.
And the startup world is right there in the mix.
It's definitely not immune. As AI gets even smarter, it makes sense it'll play a bigger role in funding.
It's exciting, but also kind of mind-blowing to think about. For all those listening, entrepreneurs, investors.
Yeah, what does this mean for them?
What are the implications of this shift to AI-powered fundraising? Is it a win-win, or are there downsides?
Well, it's complicated. There are no easy answers.
Right.
On one hand, tools like this can democratize access to funding.
So startups with great ideas, but like limited resources have a shot.
Exactly. And for investors, AI can make finding and evaluating potential investments easier.
Saving them time and resources.
Exactly.
There's a lot of upside for both sides.
Definitely. But like with any new tech, there are things to watch out for.
What kind of things?
Could there be a bias toward startups that are really good at using AI?
You mean like startups that are good at making their data and message appealing to the algorithms?
Exactly. Almost like SEO, but for fundraising.
Interesting.
And then there's the human element.
Oh, right.
Will using AI make investing less personal?
Less about relationships?
Yeah. Will the art of storytelling, building those connections, take a backseat to data?
It's a valid concern. Trust and rapport are so important in fundraising.
I agree. We don't want it to become just a transaction.
It needs to be a balance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
AI can be super useful for efficiency, insights,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't replace that human element.
Building relationships.
Right. The most successful startups, regardless of the tools, will combine data and storytelling.
Connecting with investors on a human level.
It's that personal touch.
So, as we're talking about SG, Trader AI, and all this,
Yeah.
one question keeps popping into my head.
Okay.
What advice would you give to startups thinking about using AI tools like this, for their fundraising?
That's a great question.
What are some key things they should think about
Well,
to make sure they're using it effectively and ethically?
I think the first thing is to remember AI is a tool.
Oh.
It's not some magic solution.
Right.
It can definitely help make your pitch better, reach more people.
Yeah.
But it's not going to automatically get you funding.
You still need the basics.
Exactly.
A good idea, a strong team, and knowing your market.
You got
AI can boost what you already have, but it can't create it out of thin air.
It's not magic.
So it's about using AI to make your existing efforts stronger, not replacing everything.
Exactly.
Another thing, right? Make sure you're using AI in a way that feels true to you, to
Absolutely.
your brand and your values.
Don't try to force your startup into some mold just because an algorithm might like it.
Like, don't be fake just for the AI.
Right. Investors can see right through that.
You want to use AI to show your real strengths, your passion,
That's what resonates.
not create this fake persona.
Authenticity is key.
And I guess use it as a learning experience.
Oh, definitely.
Use AI to get better at your pitch over time.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what investors say.
Both the good and the bad.
Right, and use that feedback to fine-tune your message, your whole approach.
AI can give you insights, but you have to make sense of them.
It's a partnership, not just blindly following.
Exactly.
The best startups will find that balance.
Using AI's power, but keeping their own vision. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up.
Yeah.
It's clear from our deep dive that SG Trader AI,
It's really interesting.
it's changing the game for startups trying to raise money.
It is.
It's a powerful set of tools to make a killer pitch and find the right investors.
Powerful.
But
Right.
like with any powerful tool,
Yeah.
you got to use it wisely, ethically,
For sure.
and always remember the human side of things.
That's what drives it all.
The human side of innovation and success.
Exactly.
So to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
embrace the possibilities of AI,
Absolutely.
but stay true to those values that matter most.
Couldn't agree more.
The future of startups, it's bright.
It is.
And with the right tools and mindset, you can achieve anything.
I believe that.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating deep dive
It was my pleasure.
into AI and startup
There's
fundraising.
a lot to think about.
We hope you learned something valuable to apply to your own journey.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious.
Okay, today I'm going to talk about how to succeed with a startup. Obviously, more than can be said here in 20 minutes, but I will do the best I can. The most important thing, the number one lesson we try to teach startups is that the degree to which you're successful approximates the degree to which you build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it. Startups always ask us for the secret to success. They always want to believe it's something other than this, because this is really hard to do. But this is it. If you can build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it, you have done 80% of the work that you need to be a really successful startup. If you think about the most successful companies you know, Google, Facebook, whatever, you probably found out about them because a friend of yours said, you got to try this, it's great. So this is the bar. Something that people love so much they tell their friends about it. One important indicator for a product like that is a product that's simple to explain and easy to understand. If you can't explain in a few words what you do, and if at least some people don't say, oh, that's pretty interesting, that's usually a mistake. It's usually a sign of unclear thinking or a need that is not big enough.
I want a bank that shows me what I spend instantly.
We're Monzo. Give us a go. See?
Well, I want a bank that can help me budget for the things I need, like a new leather jacket for Bingo.
We can do that.
Bingo's my cockapoo.
Hi, Bingo.
It's a real faff to sign up.
It takes less than 10 minutes.
Race you.
You're on. Time's up. How'd you get on?
It's a draw.
Is it? We hear you, Bingo. You make Monzo Monzo.
Hi, I'm Laurie Haynes, CEO and co-founder of Shirar, and I'm really excited to tell you that we are going to be raising funds for Shirar again. After a successful raise in 2023, it's time to scale.
We hope that you enjoy the pitch deck and the financial model. Any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us, and we can't wait for you to be part of Shirar.
We could talk to you more about Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East. We could talk about Syria and Iran. We don't have time to do any of those things. What I want to do is just in our last 45 seconds, talk about the significance of all of this happening against a backdrop of a changing administration here in the United States, one that was caught off guard by South Korea today.
Well, that is the question, but also it just reflects a changing world. I mean, beyond the US, we're in a world where the US is no longer the singular dominant power. So you're seeing a lot of change erupting from that. Countries deciding to work out, can they have that power block? Are they in that group instead? Where do they belong? The rise of the global South in that. So a lot of fragmentation into different power groups, and that's just natural when you see, arguably a declining singular global power and more of a multipolar world.
20 seconds. Is there a common thread? Is it the rise of populism? Is it just another cycle in the world's history? How do you see that?
It's a bit of everything, but it is that question again of populist movements in several countries. It's not just all on the right, I would add as well. It's parties on the left, and the idea of public saying, I want a party, a leadership who's going to talk with me, not at me. And so politicians who are astute, who pick up on that, are the ones who are being successful.
Don't go home.
I was just going to say, make sure you stay until tomorrow, Liz.
This is why we love Bloomberg, because of people like you. Thank you so much. Roz Matheson, Bloomberg's news director, I should say, overseeing EMA.
It's 2:21 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. The South Korean won pared its losses, officials pledging to stabilize financial markets. It is 1.7% lower now, 14.28 against the dollar. After South Korea's president declared martial law, the finance minister said they would provide unlimited liquidity to help stabilize the markets. Lawmakers in South Korea have voted unanimously to lift martial law. French lawmakers will hold a no-confidence vote against Prime Minister Michel Barnier tomorrow. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen and a left-wing coalition are expected to join forces to topple the French government, all creating uncertainty around the budget and an unknown potential economic and financial impact. The euro now 0.2% higher, trading at 105 against the dollar. We check markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is little changed on the downside. NASDAQ is up 0.2%, and the Dow is down 0.2%. The Russell 2000 index is down 0.8%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.2%. The 2-year yield at 4.15%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's go back to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek.
This is just one of those days, right, Amy? It's just hard to keep up. You just fast and furious.
That's a lot. It's a lot.
You're doing great. All right, Amy Morris there. Hey, listen, folks, we did want to get to a Bloomberg exclusive. SpaceX is in talks to sell insider shares in a transaction valuing the rocket and satellite maker at about $350 billion. That's according to those familiar with the matter. It's a massive jump, highlighting the post-election gains across Elon Musk's business empire. It turns out it's good to be acquainted with the president-elect.
Just look at Tesla since, November, up 40% in the month of November alone. Back to SpaceX, though, would be a significant premium to a previously mulled valuation of $255 billion, as reported by Bloomberg News and other media outlets just last month. SpaceX was last valued at about $210 billion. That was a tender offer earlier this year. For more on all of this in the Elon universe, back with us is Max Chapkin, Bloomberg Businessweek columnist. He's also the co-host of Elon Inc., the podcast. He's also the author of The Contrarian, Peter Thiel, and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power. Max joins us here in the studio. So SpaceX operates in a space where they're pretty much the only player in certain elements of it. I mean, look at what Boeing had to call, the U.S. government had to call on SpaceX to rescue those astronauts because Boeing couldn't do it.
They are the only player in the United States for launching astronauts, and they are the major player for all rocket launches of all kinds.
Okay, so
they have a huge share of the market overall.
Why is the world so much better for SpaceX under Trump?
Because SpaceX is a government contractor, and most of its money comes from the U.S. government.
But that would have happened had Harris won.
It's true,
There's
but there
nowhere else to spend that money.
It's easy to get. You don't want to overstate their dominance. So they dominate, but there are a bunch of other players, including a bunch of large defense contractors that also have programs, both for launches and also for astronauts. And if you look at the plans for the moon mission, right? SpaceX is only one of a handful of companies that have contracts for this mission. Now Trump could very easily change that mix, and there's already talk. Musk has suggested that it would be better to skip the moon and go straight to Mars or something like that. So there are lots of ways that Trump or a Trump administration could help Elon Musk. And the most basic one has to do with Starlink. So Starlink was in the running for subsidies for rural internet. It lost out on some of those subsidies. Musk has been very angry about that. And the Trump's nominee to run the FCC was one of the voices saying, hey, this is a great injustice. He's a huge fan of SpaceX and of Elon Musk. So even if you don't see some kind of dramatic shift in space policy, this is very likely to lead to more revenue for SpaceX than it was already going to get. And, that's why the valuation's gone up. It's actually much more straightforward than the case for, why Tesla should be worth 40 or 50% more than it was worth before November.
Wow.
So in other words, their businesses make sense, and it's likely to just keep growing.
Exactly. Yeah. There are a bunch of clear ways, and you see analysts, both telecom analysts and space analysts, talking about this. This is not some kind of hypothetical. You have to squint and imagine some weird, huge regulatory changes to how the government regulates Elon Musk's empire. This is just the government taking out its very large paycheck and giving Elon Musk a little bit more money.
It's interesting because we're seeing it play out. So this is playing out in the private markets right now. We've seen it play out in the public markets over the last month with Tesla up 40%, basically in the month of November.
Yeah.
Why is SpaceX more of a beneficiary than Tesla? Because certainly public market investors are saying, hey, Tesla's a huge winner here too.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the same argument, and I would be surprised. You know, this is what makes it surprising is the size of the figure and the fact that they just wrote up the valuation very recently, as you said. But I would not be shocked if everywhere in Elon Musk's empire, so XAI, that's his AI thing, the Boring Company, if they are also quietly doing this kind of thing, looking at higher valuations, looking at what they can do to take advantage of this moment, because investors are very excited about this. And one thing I should note about SpaceX that also makes it different from Tesla, and one of the reasons why this is more likely, like it's more likely that they will benefit, is that they have a good argument for this. Their product, as you said, is good. They are doing a good job. So you don't have to squint and see some kind of backroom political thing. You could just move the needle a little bit, and it might lead to a lot.
Max mentioned X.
Yeah.
Axios reported earlier this week that Fidelity actually wrote up the value of X, which is, in the last few months they've written down the value of their investment in X, but a lot of that might have to do with XAI.
I mean, I think it makes sense that they wrote the value up, and we've been saying that on the Elon Inc. podcast that this was going to happen. I mean, X, if the election of Donald Trump a few weeks back showed us anything, it is that Elon Musk's media company is influential. And yes, the advertising business isn't looking great, but they have other ways to make money. AI and making their data available to AI companies, including X, is one way. Subscriptions could be another way. This is a company that has gotten more important than it was before, and I think there's a case for raising the valuation.
We were just showing some footage of, was it last month, where President-elect Donald Trump was there with Elon Musk at another launch by SpaceX. Having said that, so great for Elon to be able to say, hey, Trump, he's there, right? Very accessible in terms of talking to him. If they have a falling out, does everybody kind of rethink some stuff? And especially when it comes to valuations?
Look, anytime a business politicizes itself, it creates risk. And one of the reasons that business leaders try not to do this, try not to show up on stage with Donald Trump, is because if there is a break or if the political winds shift, then all of a sudden you're in a box. Now, I would say that I think Elon Musk has a lot to work with, even if the relationship, this probably stressful and inevitably, there may be a fracture, interpersonal relationship. Even if it falls apart, Musk is going to have power both in terms of at the negotiating table with the U.S. government as SpaceX tries to sell it more launches or tries to sell it satellite internet services, because the competition is not that well established, because no one is shuttling astronauts back and forth, and also because Elon Musk will be important within the conservative movement whether or not Donald Trump likes him.
So are all the other billionaires who are doing space, Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, it's not happening anymore?
No, they are all trying to do this, and we saw Bezos, offer his congratulations to the president-elect on X, on Twitter, where he hadn't posted for a long time. You also saw, the Washington Post decline to make an endorsement, which at least some critics were seeing as a, politically motivated thing designed to help Bezos's rocket company. Now, he denied that. No, he very much wants to sell launches to the U.S. government, and you're going to see other defense contractors, traditional defense contractors, push back. And it's not like they have nothing to work with. These companies provide jobs in states. They operate factories. They have constituencies as well. So it's not like Elon Musk can overnight take over the entire aerospace industry. He's just in a much better position than he was a month ago.
I do want to interrupt you very briefly, Max. We're getting some news out of South Korea. South Korea's Yoon, the president there, saying that on TV that he will lift martial law. So an update to the conversation that we had just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and we do have a live blog, as you mentioned earlier, so you can go to MLive and just check it out on the Bloomberg terminal.
Okay, so Max talking about how powerful Elon is.
Or TLive, excuse me. Yeah.
Max talking about how powerful Elon is. Certainly when it comes to Tesla, when it comes to having the ear of the president-elect.
He doesn't win all the time, does he?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a Delaware judge that seems to sort of have an edge right now.
Yeah.
What's going on with this pay package?
So for a second time, Elon Musk's very, very large, historically large pay package, which, as of now is worth more than $100 million, according to the Bloomberg story that we published, although has been worth, $50 billion. The last time it was rejected. Now, if you remember, a judge had rejected this. There was a shareholder vote. Shareholders approved the pay package, and the thought, at least from Elon Musk and Tesla's point of view, was that this would essentially invalidate the Delaware ruling. The judge said, no, you can't undo a court ruling by having a vote of shareholders. That's a novel application of law that's invalid. And so we're sort of back where we started. Tesla's shareholders would very much like to keep Elon Musk happy, which, as far as many of them see it, and he sees it, means paying him a huge amount of money. And Delaware is not amenable yet, although we'll see. Musk and his lawyers have said they're going to appeal to the Supreme Court of Delaware, so it's possible they could overturn it. And then it's also possible he could just take his business to Texas, as he's threatened to do.
What?
Does this change when, I know this is a state issue right now, but does this change when Donald Trump becomes president again?
No, I mean, it's a state issue, and it's also, again, Musk has already moved the company to Texas. You could imagine trying to do this again and then fighting it out in a Texas court, which in theory would probably be more amenable to the pay package than Delaware was. I just look at this as, Musk doesn't need the money right now. He's very wealthy.
Wait, you don't need to start a GoFundMe page for him?
He'll be fine.
We do the CEO of GoFundMe on. We do the CEO of GoFundMe on later.
Yeah,
we'll
it's
talk
a
to him
little
about
deep tease for him.
I'm sure he'll take any checks we send him, but he doesn't need the money now. I do think this is a reminder that Elon Musk cannot change the laws of gravity, and he cannot change the laws. There are a lot of people making huge investments in his companies right now, including in Tesla, and even with this SpaceX deal, based on some kind of vague sense that politics will sort of shift the laws of business in his favor. But there are laws of business that are not in his favor, and this is one of them. He's repeatedly gone up against this Delaware judge. Remember, this is the same judge that forced him to buy Twitter/X. So he can't do everything, and again, there are going to be battles ahead, legal battles, political battles, and he's vulnerable to the whims of law and democracy and all that, just like everyone else.
I mean, he can't get everything he wants, but almost. What?
Well, why is the money so important to him?
I don't know, honestly.
Like, if you're let's see,
Here,
Rich
it's
go.
in there. It's $353 billion. He's
So the
top
same
of the
as
list.
basically SpaceX, right?
I mean, he's
what's an extra $50
easily
billion?
number one.
What can you buy with $400 billion that you can't buy with $350 billion?
I mean, he has said that he intends to, play a big role in the midterm elections. There's chatter about potential huge donations to British politicians. So maybe he wants to just a little extra cash for his political stuff. But really, I think this is more for him and the people who back him about the principle. And Elon Musk is somebody who has put now a principle. I think there are people who would snicker at that, but Elon Musk has put his own role in Tesla and its growth central to its brand, and he sees this as an attack, rightfully or wrongly.
Max Chafkin, always appreciated, co-host of the Elon Inc. podcast, a new episode downloading. We do want to mention martial law lifted in South Korea.
It's 2:40 on Wall Street. I'm Amy Morris. We check markets for you all day long at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is a little changed on the upside. NASDAQ is up 0.2%. The Dow is down 0.1%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.21% and the 2-year yield at 4.16%. South Korea's president now says he's going to lift martial law. Now, he declared it in a shock move earlier today. That sent the won tumbling. The won is now 1.7% lower, trading at 14.28 against the dollar. Again, South Korea's president, after that shocking move earlier today, now says he will lift martial law in South Korea. Federal Reserve Governor Adriana Kugler expressed optimism about the trajectory of inflation and broader economic conditions, while underscoring the central bank's policy decisions are not on a preset course. Several officials in recent weeks have advocated for a cautious approach to further rate cuts. Fed officials will issue their next decision following their December 17th and 18th meeting in Washington. U.S. job openings picked up in October, suggesting demand for workers is stabilizing after steep declines in recent months. The Bureau of Labor Statistics JOLTS survey shows available positions increased to 7.74 million from a revised 7.37 million in September. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now back to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivak.
All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. Amy Morris there in D.C. All right, just about 1 year ago, our Bloomberg News team put together a great story highlighting the stock optimists who nailed 2023 and saw more gains ahead. One of those stock optimists who made the right call last year is Ryan Dietrich. Dietrich expected the U.S. economy to avoid a recession in 2023.
Check.
It did, right? Some say a little bit of a rolling recession, but really we kind of missed it in a big way. He also bet inflation would cool sooner than the market was expecting.
Check. It's still getting there. It's still getting there.
We're still getting there. It's a little sticky.
Yeah.
He added exposure to stocks during the banking turmoil in March 2023 and as the S&P 500 sank in October of 2023. Gotta say, Tim, check. Good calls.
Yeah, Ryan Dietrich, he's Chief Market Strategist at the RIA and Platform for Advisors of the Carson Group. He joins us here in the Bloomberg Business Week studio.
Well done.
Well, Carol, can I
hold on, the year's not over, Carol, okay?
Every time I present or something, can I have you come and give that little intro? That was very nice. Thank you.
Listen, when people make bad calls, we kind of point it out.
Oh, yeah.
And the same goes for when you make a really good call.
Well, thank you.
So
yeah, it was 2 years ago this month, December of 22. Carson Group went on record. We went overweight stocks. We managed real money for our advisors, and we said no recession. It wasn't very popular, but as we know now, we're looking at 54 new all-time highs, the back-to-back 20% gains. We can get into all of it, but yeah, it's been a great run. Clearly.
So some people might say the U.S. stocks are expensive right now by certain measures, but you argue that there's still room. You argue the bull market is still young.
That's correct. You know, I mean, there's a couple ways to answer this one. Stocks are a little pricey. I mean, you look at the forward S&P 500 earnings, they are a little bit pricey. But then you look at other parts of the market. I've come on with you guys for 2 years talking about some of these things. Small caps still are cheap. Mid caps still are cheap. Industrials, financials, there are parts that are cheap. Yes, large caps are expensive. When you talk about bull markets, though, it's so fascinating. This one's about 2 years old, right? October 22, so I had 2 years. So we'll call it 25, 26 months right now. Once a bull market gets into its third year, like this one is right now, into the third year.
Get a little tired?
Yeah, not really, because it looks like a cruise ship. Once they get moving, they keep moving. I went back 40 years, last 5 bull markets that got into the third year, every one of them made it to at least their 5th year, and actually it was an average of 8 years. I'm not saying this one's going to go 8 years. We're just saying these cycles can last a lot longer than you think.
But were stocks as expensive in their second year as they are now in other bull markets?
I guess the short answer is no. That's a great point. They're not. And one other concern, if you want to use that, is if you look at, like, we gained over 60%, okay, the first 2 years of this bull market. Looking at, like, the last 9 bull markets that made it into the third year, that third year is up only like 2 or 3%. So some consolidation. We think we're going to gain more than that the next 12 months, to be clear. But those are some things to think about. We just had this huge rally. We don't see a recession. Look at the economic data. All-time highs in construction spending just yesterday. All-time highs in earnings estimates we still think are going to be strong. We can get into more of the weeds of that, but there's no recession coming, so we'd still be overweight equities like we have been for 24 months now.
You know, I'm looking at the equal weighted S&P 500, and it's up about just shy of 18% for the year. S&P 500 is up about 27%. Yeah. If I look at both equal weighted, just coming off overbought levels, I'm assuming, let me just pull it up on the Bloomberg, the RSI, and if you look at the relative strength on the S&P 500, overbought.
Yep.
So, I mean, what what is it? Just momentum creates momentum, which to me doesn't say that's necessarily a good thing to buy into. It's different if it's fundamentals, it's earnings based, it's those kind of things that I can actually trade on.
Yeah, there's different things you can look at there. When you think about the equal weight, what's that tell us? Well, it tells us a lot of participation, right? We know that. Look at various advanced decline lines on
Right, we've
small
seen it
caps,
broadening
mid caps.
out.
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. Just 2 weeks ago, right? There's 11 sectors. 10 of them outperformed the S&P 500. Last week, 8 of them outperformed the S&P 500. What's happened since the election? Small caps, mid caps, a lot of other areas, not just tech, not just communications, have been doing well. So that's that broadening out. But I'm with you 100%. Those are the technicals. Then we look at the fundamentals. I mean, what are the credit spreads doing? You mentioned March of 23 when you had the banking crisis.
Yeah.
We didn't really see much stress in the credit markets. Think about the yen carry trade unwind, those 3 very scary days earlier in August. You know what the U.S. dollar did? U.S. dollar went down then. Historically, when the dollar goes up, that's a worry. Now, I will say right here and now, one of our worry, we're still bullish.
Because it's seen as a safe haven?
Exactly, seen as a safe haven, but you've got dollar strength. I'm surprised, honestly, the dollar's been as strong as, the stock market's been as strong as it has been with the dollar strength we've seen. So into next year, if the dollar continues to strengthen, that is a concern of ours. We don't expect it to, but if it does, that could be a sign that, maybe a little more risk off is in play, but we're not seeing it yet, let's be clear.
What is the difference going into 2025 versus what you saw a year ago sitting there?
Great question.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I guess we're all 1 year older, that's for sure. But I will say one big difference, what we're seeing now, kind of the other answer, we are seeing broadening out. We are seeing a lot of participation. Remember those last 2 months last year, big rally, small caps, Russell 2 by small caps, gained like 21%. Then they were flat the first 6 months of this year. But since the middle of the year, we are seeing more of a broadening out, which is a nice thing. Also, manufacturing has not done very well in our country. We get it. But just look at that data we saw yesterday. Maybe we're starting, maybe, tell me there's a chance here. You're starting to see a bottom, if you will, in some of the manufacturing data, which is a positive. But services have been strong the whole time. Earnings have been pretty strong the whole time. So there are some similarities, but the reality again is one more thing on this. So we're up let's assume we're up 20% this year. I know we're not there yet, but we probably will be. We looked at back-to-back 20% gains since 1950, found 8 of them. What happened the next year? Market was up 6 times, up 13% on average. So it's not like a huge gain, but just because we're up 20% 2 years in a row, that is not a reason to be bearish. And there's other stuff to look at, I get it, but that's just something to be aware of.
Any of those 8 years have a new president in the White House?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure, but I can dive into that for a second here. When you look at, as a new president is a re-elected president. I get we can look at that either way, but when you look at re-elected presidents, year 1, stocks do really well. In year 2, they do really well. It's later in a re-elected president's term they don't do as well versus the exact mirror image of that, what we just saw with President Biden. First, second year, not as good, but third and fourth are strong. And again, you can get into the weeds of why this is, probably because you know what you're going to get. There's less uncertainty with someone who's potentially won a re-election, and I get it. This time is a little bit different. But the reality, again, is, you look at what's happening, and then we can get into the F word, the Fed, if you want. I mean, that's another big driver here.
Well, I wanted to do, before we get to the F word, let's do the T word, tariffs.
What's that? Oh, okay.
Because, and I think Carol was getting at this, but the idea...
I thought it was Thanksgiving. How much turkey we had.
That has come and gone, unfortunately.
In the rear view.
In the rear view. But I'm wondering about what that does to the market if the president-elect ends up going through with the tariffs that he's threatened. We had Henrietta Trey's on last week from Veda, who said, he's going to do it if he says he's going to do it. What does that do? Especially to small caps.
Yeah, well, what do we know? We had a 15-month rally after the election in 2016. February 4th was when we all say slapped on tariffs. And the market didn't have a very good year in 2018. Maybe there are other factors in there, but that's the reality of what happened. Now, I will say this. We're all talking about it now, right? Mr. Market's probably priced a lot of this in. The reality is if you do the 25% tariffs on, I guess Canada and Mexico and 10% tariffs on China, the full thing, that probably will slow down the rally we've seen, maybe potentially cause a little bit more inflation. I will say this, though. You look at inflation, year-over-year CPI in 2018 and 2019 when those tariffs started, it's not like we saw massive inflation. I get it. Parts of the economy saw inflation, but the overall